Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Broccoli Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Was in Class 1B. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Izuku gulped as he arrived in front of UA, his class letter in his hands. Okay, this is it. Hopefully I'm not going to be in the same class as Kaken, or that glasses guy, maybe the nice girl. Izuku smiled to himself as he prayed for certain people to not be and to be in his class, though he had still not taken a step on campus. He had just stayed at the gates and hadn't moved a single step. It's now or never. He psyched himself up and let out a breath, smiling as he gazed upon the buildings of the school. This is My Hero Academia. He remembered All Might's words and how he had passed. Not a single villain point to his score. But that was fine really. He passed with just rescue points, which he was still reeling at the fact that they existed, and that seemed oddly fitting for him. He smiled as he nodded to himself and took a step, and tripped. Is this going to happen every time I come here? He yelled in his head as he braced his face for impact, only to hover right before he hit the pavement. Is this going to happen every time too? Wait, I'm not falling. Maybe it's the nice girl. He smiled at the thought of having someone nice to talk to for once. Perhaps you could lay your bottom limbs on the ground so I could stop using my power. It's quite straining. He heard a voice, which sounded nothing like the nice girl's, but it still wasn't rude like what he had been used to. He listened and put his feet on the ground. The feeling of being held off the ground disappeared and he heard a quiet, "Thank you." He turned around and found someone who was in fact not the nice girl. He already knew that, but seeing it made him sigh. But she looked interesting, short gray, borderline white, hair that draped over one of her eyes. A cerulean eye was visible on her face and her wrists holding her hands as if she was a zombie, and floating off the ground as well. Okay, that last one was weird and Izuku wanted to write it down in his notebook. Thank you. Izuku got out as he looked at her. Communicating was still not his strong suit. The girl looked at him, her bottom lip dragged down leaving her mouth open. Your stuttering shows signs of inner demons. Are you alright? She cocked her head to one side. It was actually kind of cute. Izuku blushed and waved his hands in front of his face. Why yes, I'm fine. He practically yelled. He felt his palms getting sweaty. Just because he had told Kaken off at Alder didn't mean he was suddenly amazing in terms of all the damage that had been done over the years. And it'd probably get worse if they were in the same class. I'm Mizuku Idoriya. I mean Izuku Midoriya. He yelled as he went ramrod straight in a bow. The girl tilted her head again, a finger on her chin. You are cursed with nervousness. Also I go by Ryuko Yanagi. She said, if I may inquire, what class has fate put you in? Izuku locked up. He patted his clothes a couple of times before realizing his class letter was in his hands. He opened it up and read a couple of lines before looking back at the girl. I'm in Class 1B, he said without a stutter score. The girl cocked her head again. Well, it seems outside forces have willed us to meet. I am designated to that class as well. She spoke as she floated past him, Izuku's eyes following her. We should set forth on our quest of darkness. Best not keep whoever our sensei is waiting. UA is free, cruelty can come and no one will bat an eye. She kept on walking. Izuku nodded, a little confused but getting the basic gist of it, and followed her inside. They wandered the halls, Izuku hoping she knew where she was going because he had no idea where they were going at all. The girl looked around the halls, placing a finger on her chin before looking back at him. Do you have a navigation device for this maze? She asked, and Izuku's sweat dropped before pulling out a student handbook and giving it to her. She inspected it for a second before turning around and walking in the opposite direction they'd been going. Izuku let out a sigh and a chuckle as he followed Yanagi. He watched her as she looked at the doors they passed, none of them having one beyond them. They began walking faster, or Yanagi floated and Izuku followed by walking, but they didn't talk at all. However, the girl did seem very nice. It would be nice to befriend her, Izuku thought so. So he swallowed all of his courage and opened his mouth as so, Yanagi-chan, how was your trip to campus? He hated himself. He wanted to smack himself upside the head so badly right now. Was that the best he could come up with? Sadly, yes, it was, and he hated himself for it. But at least he didn't ask her about the weather. The girl turned to him, as they were side by side. My journey was fairly normal, though my parents shed many tears at my departure. She turned back to look at the map as they searched for the classroom. Izuku nodded. He understood that. After all, his mother seemed like she was going to drown the house they were in. Why yeah, I can relate to that, but I'm sure they were happy tears. They must be really proud. Izuku added in. Yanagi took a glance at him and nodded, before turning back to the map. She squinted her eyes before nodding. Looking up at that moment, we've arrived at our destination, she said, unknowingly mimicking a GPS. Izuku looked at the door in front of them, and the sign above it did in fact say 1B and he gulped. Please, please be different. Please let me make friends for once. Please let me talk to people without being laughed at, please. Izuku prayed as Yanagi reached for the door and slid it open. It was loud. Not too loud as Izuku had dealt with explosions before, but a moderate amount of noise. So much that no one had noticed them when they entered. Yanagi floated in, Izuku gulping and swallowing his nerves before following suit. Izuku took glances at his classmates, seeing no familiar faces. He both sighed in relief and sadness. On one hand, the engine guy wasn't in his class and Kaken wasn't either. But the nice girl wasn't. She was here. Oh no she wasn't. Just someone that looked really similar was all. Izuku deflated a lot. There were no familiar faces, but at least that was kind of a good thing. No one he saw was from his exam area. Or at least he hadn't remembered seeing any of these people in his exam area. There was a high chance that someone from his exam area was here, since he hadn't really been paying attention after the zero-pointer fiasco. Now the entire event was all really a blur to him, besides his final stand against the beast of metal. He noticed Yanagi was moving to find a seat and he figured he should do the same. He found one near a window and sat there. It was the second to last seat near the window and he found it comfortable as he sat down. The window wasn't open but the sun was coming in through the class and it made Izuku smile. It was calming. Izuku was going to open his notebook up to write down stuff about Yanagi's quirk, but his attention was cut off by the sound of 2 claps coming from the front of the class. Izuku looked up and a blonde boy was standing at the podium. He had periwinkle eyes and a slight smug look that reminded Izuku too much of Bakugo. The boy sighed as all the attention finally came to him. He laughed and brushed his hair back. If I may inquire. His smile seemed to stretch the more he talked. How many of you here made the top 10? He asked with a crazed look. The class hummed. The kid was kinda weird so far. Slowly some people put their hands up. Izuku saw a girl with vine hair do it first, then a girl with ginger hair. He swallowed and wondered if he should put his own hand up. He was in the top 10 after all. ID. A loud yell cut through the class as a boy with gray hair and weird eyelashes shot his hands up and yelled. Izuku shivered. The guy was intense. Izuku didn't like intense, but he seemed nice, if just overexcited. After all, his crazy yell was just loud. It didn't hold the same cruelty that Kaken's did. A boy with black hair and a headband put his hand up. Though he looked rather angry, maybe that was just how he looked. Izuku sighed and his right hand shook as he slowly rose it. His left hand clenching his pant leg in fear and worry. Come on, it's not that big of a deal, you can do this. He yelled at himself as clenched his hand into a fist. You want this to be different, don't you? Do something about it, please. He clenched his teeth and willed himself to shoot his hand up, only for the door for the class to slam open. All of the students looked to the doorway, seeing a giant of a man with snow-white hair and blood-red eyes with an underbite. Izuku's eyes gained stars as he instantly knew who the man was. The man shifted his gaze to the podium where he saw the blonde. Take a seat, he bit out and the boy laughed. Of course, the boy said. Many of the students rose a brow at the boy's odd behavior before he moved and sat in front of Izuku. The greenette sucked in a breath at that. The man moved as he stood in front of the podium, his gaze moving across the sea of students, his eyes landing on Izuku for a second before he shifted his view to the entire class. Izuku was confused at the action as the man grunted. My name is Sekijiro Kan. I'm the blood hero, Vlad King. The man said. Some of the students gained eyes of recognition, though most didn't. Izuku was one of the few that did, however. Izuku started drawing a picture of the hero as murmuring arose between the students. It was of him standing behind the podium, with his arms crossed, basically just how he looked in the moment. It wasn't something you could do every day after all. Though both Monoma and Yanagi, who were sitting in front and behind him respectively, turned to him because of his mumbling as he drew. Monoma turned around and rose a brow as Izuku mumbled about Vlad King. Yanagi peeked over Izuku's shoulder and watched as Izuku sketched more. The boy stuck his tongue out as he got to the man's face, which he was having a hard time drawing. Midoriya. The strong voice of the pro knocked Izuku out of his musing. Izuku's head shot up as he looked across the classroom. Everyone was looking at him, waiting for him to say something. What they wanted him to say. He didn't know. Izuku shot out of his seat, blushing a bit. Why yes, Kan-sensei. He stood rigidly and dropped his head as he heard snickering to his right. The man narrowed his eyes a bit. Introduce yourself, Midoriya, he said as he crossed his arms. The man wondered why the boy's nerves were so high. He had a strong quirk, which usually meant an enormous amount of confidence, though maybe it was because the quirk broke him while using. Izuku nodded, bowing to the class. Hi, my name is Izuku Midoriya. He got out of his bow and went to sit down. And your quirk? A kid with claw-like mandibles on his face asked with a fierce voice and crossed arms. Izuku locked up. He'd never had to introduce a quirk before since he didn't have one. But now he did, and kids always gloated about quirks during introductions, trying to one-up others while trying to make their quirks sound cooler than they usually were. And my quirk is superpower and it gives me superpower. He yelled quickly and equally as quickly sat back down in his chair. He heard more chuckles and he grimaced. Even with Kaken interfering, Izuku doubted he would make any friends this year. Well, he had made an acquaintance of Yanagi, so hopefully that was worth something. He heard said girl get out of her own seat behind him. It is a pleasure to make an acquaintance with you all. My name is Ryuko Yanagi. My ability is Poltergeist, allowing me to move objects freely through the air. She sat back down, but in the small amount of time between her finishing and sitting down, Izuku's mind had already started blasting. Telekinesis. That's how she made herself float. That was so cool. Izuku almost went on a self-indulgent nerd rant before Vlad King spoke up. All right, all of you out of your seats. We're going to orientation. After we'll be taking a test. So get up and move it. Izuku heard much of the class groan in annoyance and disappointment. A test on the first day. It was horrible, but they complied, getting out of their seats and grabbing their bags. Izuku did so as well, throwing his yellow backpack over his shoulder. The boy felt a tap on his shoulder and he turned to see the blonde guy from earlier. He wasn't paying attention, so he didn't get anyone's names. Hi. Monoma, Nito Monoma, it's clear you weren't paying attention during introductions, the boy said with some flair and a grin as he rustled his hair. Izuku looked down in embarrassment. Was it really that obvious? He just liked heroes a lot, but was it that much of a distraction to him? Apparently so, because he didn't even know anybody's names, well besides Yanagi. Sorry, Izuku mumbled, already setting back into the motions that he had become used to in junior high. The boy waved a hand. Do not worry about it, Midoriya. To make up for it, why don't we sit together at orientation, get to know each other a little bit? He asked as he let out a hand for Izuku to shake. The greenette stared at it for a second before shaking it. Sure, Monoma-kun. The boy felt another tap on his shoulder and turned around to see Ryuko tilting her head at him. It made him yelp. He couldn't deal with girls. Midoriya-kun, I would like to inquire if I could accompany you at orientation as well, she asked as Izuku stiffened as he nodded slowly. Why yes, sure, you can. He got out as the class began filing out. They walked through the halls and the trio of Izuku, Monoma, and Yanagi didn't make much, if any, conversation. Though both of the people Izuku had met were stealing glances at him, for different reasons of course. They all followed Vlad King as they entered an auditorium, taking their seats where the man said to sit. Izuku noticed that there were empty seats in front of where they were sitting, and by the time the lights went off no class had arrived to take the spot. There's a class missing, Izuku muttered from between Yanagi and Monoma, the girl on his right and the boy on his left. The two turned to look at him, Yanagi with a face of confusion and Monoma with one of understanding. Yes, I do believe that class is supposed to be 1A, though I don't know why they aren't here. Honestly, it's truly deplorable to skip an event as such. They must be a group of heathens, Monoma whispered so they could hear as the orientation started. It was much of the same, where certain classes would be taking place and when they would be taking place as well, except it was presented by Nezu, the principal, which Izuku totally didn't nerd out about. They'd have hero course classes in the morning and then normal classes in the afternoon. The opposite of what Wana was going to be having, with hero course classes in the afternoon and normal class in the morning. There was an announcement of a mystery teacher who'd be teaching their hero course classes, Hero Foundations 101, but they'd have to wait until their first heroics class for that. Izuku took the pamphlet that had all the information on it, and any other information that wasn't on it he wrote down. Eventually the presentation ended and Nezu congratulated them all on making it in before bidding them farewell. The lights turned back on, and once they were allowed to leave, Vlad King told them to head back to class. They all followed, but Izuku wondered about the mystery teacher. His letter was presented to him by All Might, but so far he hadn't seen the man anywhere. Not in the halls, not at orientation either. Was he going to be the Hero Foundation's 101 teacher? What was that, Midoriya? Monoma asked as Izuku realized he had been mumbling. And nothing, just wondering who was going to teach our heroics class is all. He covered up, letting out a chuckle afterwards. I have been inquiring about that myself. I do hope it is someone we may gain much wisdom and knowledge from. Yanagi added in as they entered the class. Vlad waited for all the students to be seated, after which he nodded. All right, now it's time for your test, the gruff man announced as they all sat in the class. Izuku heard some groans, but he didn't mind all that much. As long as it wasn't quirk-based, he still had to learn how to use one for all without breaking himself. We'll be having a quirk assessment test outside at Training Field B. There should be gym uniforms in your desks. Take them, change, and meet me outside. Do not be late, he yelled as he strode out of the room. Izuku wallowed in self-pity. Of course we would have a quirk assessment test on the first day, he said sadly. Both of his acquaintances noticed his mood but didn't comment on it. The class filed out as they all had grabbed their gym uniforms. In the locker room, Izuku had taken off his uniform shirt and had begun putting on the one they had received from Vlad King when he heard a yell. Whoa bro, are those scars? That's manly as hell. Izuku flinched at the loudness and turned to listen to whoever was talking. Instead he saw a guy with silver hair looking at him. Hey, he froze. He didn't know how to converse with someone who was so direct in their speech, especially when he thought about the subject matter. How'd you get him? The guy was standing in front of him with enthusiasm and was grinning like a madman. Izuku's mind broke and he silently yelled. He had gotten used to not wearing a shirt whenever he would clean up the beach when he was alone, because no one would be at the trash-filled area to see the burns and bruises that littered his body, caused of course by his best friend Kaken. The slip of mind now led to this. A group of random people seeing the product of Kaken's way of showing he cared. Izuku thought about it. Should he really tell this random guy about all the scars he had gotten because of his childhood friend? No, probably not. So instead he'd say something else. I got it from training for the entrance exam. He put the gym shirt on and rubbed his neck. You must have trained hard to develop such terrible scars. A giant, hairy-looking boy with glasses approached both Izuku and the silver teen. I must admit, it's commendable. To go so far he stuck a hand out. Shishida, Juro to Shishida. The big beast introduced himself. Izuku looked at his hand before shaking it. Nice to meet you Shishida-kun. I'm Midoriya. They filed out of the locker room, some of the boys talking amongst themselves. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw a group of boys coming from the other end of the hall towards them, so they looked like they were heading towards the locker room. But that wasn't important. What was? Kaken was at the front of the group. Izuku shivered at the sight of the blonde teen. He looked pissed. Hey Bakugo, you did awesome, man. Your ball throw really pumped me up for the rest of the test. A red-headed teen congratulated Bakugo and slapped him on the shoulder, wearing a smile. Izuku gulped. You didn't touch Bakugo unless you had a death wish. Shut the hell up, shitty hair. No matter what you do, you'll never compare to me. You're all just stepping stones in the origin story of the next #1 hero. Both groups of boys heard Bakugo's declaration. Monoma sneered. Such arrogance. He was about to tell the blonde off when a hand landed on his shoulder. He smacked away the hand and turned to see who it was. It was Izuku, and he looked horrified. I know what you're going to do, but don't. Just ignore him if you can, Monoma-kun. Izuku whispered low enough for just Monoma to hear. The blonde squinted his eyes before sighing and nodding. After all, Midoriya looked truly horrified. He turned his attention back to the blonde, Bakugo if he heard correct, and decided to just observe for now. Bakugo was too angry and busy yelling at the redhead to notice that Izuku was in the group of boys, which was good. He'd probably kill me if he saw me, Izuku thought grimly as the group of boys arrived outside. Izuku saw Vlad-sensei messing with a tablet device, and occasionally the pro would look at Izuku. He didn't know what it was about either. The girls arrived soon after and the pro announced that they would begin. Vlad King waited until all the students were here before clearing his throat. All right, we'll be having a quirk assessment test using the same tests from your junior high. Now let's begin. His loud and rough voice vibrated through the teens. Izuku gulped. He still hadn't had even the slightest clue on how to use 100% without breaking hymns. Wait, why am I trying to use 100%? Izuku asked himself as the class was led to the 50-meter dash. Of course I wouldn't be able to use 100% off the bat. My vessel was made in a hurry. I need to train more to use more, but I should just focus on the small amount I can do right now, shouldn't I? Izuku asked himself another question as the class started the event. The first two up were the kid with a headband and a guy with dark brown hair. Izuku wasn't paying much attention though, as he had his revelations. But All Might was able to use 100% off the bat, wasn't he? But what if All Might's vessel wasn't made in a hurry? That's not to mention the growth I stunted by overworking myself 6 months in. Izuku was thinking too many thoughts as he finally just decided to focus on his original thought. Why am I trying to use 100%? He repeated the thought as he pulled out a notebook. The nearby students rose brows at Izuku as he mumbled, some deciding that he was weird, others just being curious about it but focusing on the test. Vlad King piqued in curiosity. He had chosen Midoriya because Aizawa called him a liability. He wanted to prove the bastard wrong, but first he needed to get Midoriya to not break himself, and for that he needed the boy to be pushed into a situation where breaking himself wouldn't help at all. He didn't think this test would work, that they'd need to do something later in the year. Perhaps during the training for the sports festival or even the event itself. But he could tell the kid's mind was running like a bullet train, trying to think of some way to not break during this test. It was exciting, he had to admit. Izuku creased his brows. I have a feeling for 100%, but I think I should just activate one for all, focus on the egg not blowing up, then lower the heat in the microwave. Lower it until it doesn't feel like my body's creaking. If I don't move with 100%, then that's fine. Just stay still until I lower it to a good percentage, in whatever part of my body I need to use. Izuku nodded. The plan wasn't perfect, but it wasn't horrible either. He nodded to himself as he lifted his head, observing as Monoma lined up with a large boy with an odd-shaped head. The robot at the end of the finish line blared a horn and both boys ran. Monoma smirked as he sunk into the ground as it softened, going fast and appearing at the end of the track soon after. 5.35 seconds. The other boy finished a little bit later, 8.47 seconds. A skull-headed boy looked on in shock at Monoma. That was my quirk. How did he do that? He asked no one, but said it loud enough for other people to hear. Izuku listened and instantly thought about the implications. Maybe Monoma-kun has a sort of copy quirk. They're rare but not unheard of. He wanted to ask, to write down notes, but they were in the middle of a test. He doubted they'd have the time. Midoriya, Yanagi, line up. The yell of the pro cut through the crowd. Izuku squirmed as he scrambled to line up, Yanagi floating over and setting up next to him. Izuku got into a runner's stance and closed his eyes. Vlad saw and decided he'd be the gunner for this one, so he disabled the robot at the end line and held his own timer. Izuku called upon All Might's quirk, the warmth and power washing over him as he focused it in his legs. His class flinched and gasped as his pant legs tore, wind whirling up. Yanagi had to focus her telepathy to not be blasted away, which she was failing at as she was being pushed away from the start line. Monoma rose a brow in wonder and smirked. The difference between your personality and power is astounding, Midoriya, he yelled as he cackled. Vlad King began to sweat. The kid was going to break himself again. Izuku grunted as pain invaded him, but nothing was broken just yet. He took deep breaths as he focused on the egg in the microwave and lowered the heat. He didn't have an exact percentage. He had only used his full power once so far, so he couldn't properly gauge himself just yet. But he pushed it as low as he could. The wind dying down as his legs, his feet to his knees, began to glow with red like veins. The veins disappeared as small, essentially unnoticeable, green sparks of lightning birth. Izuku nodded to himself as he slowly opened his eyes, focusing everything he had into keeping the power on. Vlad King smirked just a bit. I can't wait until the sports festival when I get to show you up with this kid Aizawa, he muttered under his breath. Yanagi retook her position next to Izuku. With no wind, she could stand next to him now. All right, Vlad King yelled, almost making Izuku lose concentration. On your marks. Izuku closed his eyes, ready to shoot off in a straight line. Get set. He clenched his fists. Go. And shot off. It wasn't too much of an improvement. Nowhere near All Might's speed, but it was progress. Izuku felt lighter as he ran, and he crossed the finish line with a smile of triumph. I didn't break myself. Midoriya. 5.11 seconds. The blood hero called out. Yanagi crossed the finish line soon after. Yanagi. 7.53 seconds. He added. Izuku gasped for air as he finished. He was speechless, too happy right now. He clenched his fist as he smiled, tears threatening to break out of his eyes, but he wiped them away. I did it. It's not much, but it counts. All right, let's move on. Vlad King yelled and the students followed. They next had to do a grit strength test. Shishida had grown larger and growled as he flexed his arm, getting a score in the mid-500 seconds. The vine-haired girl used her quirk on the device and got a pretty good score. Izuku watched as a ginger-haired girl stepped up and enlarged her fist. She grunted as she attempted to crush the device, getting a score in the low 200 seconds. Izuku gulped. One for all was all about strength, so he would do his absolute best in this test. He sat down and gripped one of the devices. He closed his eyes and focused one for all into his right hand, the quirk birthing with a red veins and then a glow. Izuku had put it to the lowest output he had, but he shook his head. I need to do more, just a little bit more. It's fine, I can handle it. He grunted as he upped the output by the smallest amount he could. His entire arm felt like there were little knives stabbing at it, like how one would be when they were sore, except about 5 times worse. He grunted as he held the device as hard as he could before sighing and letting go. The device read 93.0 kgs. Not the best, but not the worst at all. All right, standing long jump. This one was going to be harder. Izuku knew that his legs were in pain. Despite using the smallest amount he could, he was feeling the after effects of doing so. His body still wasn't used to All Might's power. But he could go to Recovery Girl after, right? So he could go to the limits he had now and have her heal him. That would be fine, right? He nodded to himself as he watched a green-haired girl split her body apart and float herself to the other side of the pit. Izuku's eyes gained stars as he studied her quirk, or at least what he knew of it. More people went up and eventually it led up to Monoma, who did the same as the green-haired girl, with a little bit less of the grace she had. It basically confirmed what Izuku had thought earlier. He had a copy quirk, which was so cool. Now it was Izuku's turn. He stepped up and squatted. He knew the amount he used for the dash wouldn't be enough to clear the sandbox. He'd have to push the output past its limit if he wanted to. He grimaced as he closed his eyes and let one for all flow throughout his body. He didn't notice, but he didn't activate it at 100% and lower it. He just activated it at the low percentage to start off. He grinded his teeth as his knees wobbled in pain. He squatted lower and then unleashed his power as he jumped. And yet he still didn't get past the pit. He landed in the sand with a thud. He punched the ground. Vlad King raised a brow at Izuku's actions, but the boy got back up and got out of the pit, though looked a little sad. Yanagi moved up and used her quirk to easily clear the pit. When she was done, she turned to where Izuku was. He was staring at a clenched fist, and eventually he shook his head as Vlad King called for the next test. They did the flexibility test, and Izuku didn't use one for all on this one, and he scored decent, about in the middle. They moved on to the sit-ups, and Izuku decided not to use one for all again. All Might's training plan had decimated Izuku's body with hundreds of exercises every day. The basic push-up and sit-up didn't seem all too bad now. Izuku scored pretty well on this test, and he moved on to the next one with a smile. The repeated side steps. He didn't do so well. With how pain was vibrating through his legs, it made the test horrific for Izuku. He scored quite low on this test, and he was quite disappointed in himself at that. A girl, the one that looked like the nice girl Izuku had met during the entrance exam, used her quirk to help her with the test. Apparently she could make mushrooms. The ones she made were very bouncy, allowing her to get an impressive score on the test. They got to the second to last test, the ball throw. Izuku watched on as his classmates each did their best on this one. Since it was the second to last test and was short, everyone decided that this one was either go beyond or go home. The ginger from earlier enlarged her fist and threw it like a catapult, an idea that Izuku decided he might use. A girl grew in size, about 1.5 All Mights, and threw the ball like that, though the ball did look like it had shrunk as well, getting a good distance. The vine-haired girl tied the ball in her hair and swung it around before letting go. Shishida entered what Izuku was calling his beast mode and threw the ball with a yell. A blonde-haired girl that spoke broken Japanese disconnected her horn and balanced the ball on them before sending them off, getting a really good distance. The green-haired girl disconnected her arm and basically did the same. Monoma copied the green-haired girl's quirk, and now it was Izuku. He stepped up to receive his ball from Vlad King, but the man placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Midoriya, I know you have a problem with your quirk, as from what I saw during the entrance exam, your quirk is a form of super strength, right? Izuku nodded stiffly. All right, you've made some good progress today, but I want you to go all out on this one. He lifted his hand off of Izuku's shoulder and handed the boy the ball. Izuku gulped as he nodded. But do try to minimize the damage. You don't want Recovery Girl getting on your case, he said, and Izuku nodded stiffly. The ginger girl rose a brow. What was that about? The green-haired girl shook her head. No idea, honestly. Wonder what's so special about Greenie. Monoma cackled. Yanagi turned to him and rose a brow. What about our mutual acquaintance makes you feel such joy, Monoma-kun? She asked. The boy calmed his laughs as he messed with his bangs. Midoriya holds a deep amount of power, but it seems that he can't use all of it to its fullest potential, Monoma stated. The class remembered the win during the 50 meters dash. Man, first it's the scars. Now he's stupid strong. Midoriya is so manly. The silver-haired teen yelled with a wide smile. The girls turned to him in confusion. Did you say SS scars? The small girl that looked like the nice girl asked, but she asked so quietly no one noticed, and thus she was ignored. He doesn't look like much, a bug-looking teen stated with crossed arms. Now, don't downplay our peers. Midoriya has done very well during this test, Shishida stated to the bug teen. TCH, whatever. The boy scoffed. Why don't you put your money where your mouth is, bug boy? Monoma sneered at the teen, but he didn't take his eyes off of the one doing the ball throw. The boy grit his teeth. Why you? Just shut up and pay attention, Monoma said coldly and calmly. The class a little wide-eyed at the action. They didn't want some of their classmates fighting on the first day. And the boy had been nothing but loud and proud the entire day. But the class paid attention. Izuku was in the throwing circle as he closed his eyes, holding the ball as he focused on his right arm. Sensei wants me to go all out, but to limit the damage, how can I do that? Izuku huffed for a second before an idea came to mind. Last point of contact. It won't go as far as it normally would, but it won't damage me too much either. He nodded as he finished his plan. Monoma grinned a bit and softly chuckled. Vlad nodded. It was only the first day and the boy had already proved Aizawa wrong in so many ways. But there was still the question, if pushed to his limits, could he still assist afterwards? Or would he be too broken to do anything? The image of 2 broken legs and a broken arm, laying unconscious in the middle of the street, came to Vlad's mind. The boy had a heroic spark, yet Aizawa called him idiotic and a waste of time. He grit his teeth. Aizawa would be proved wrong. Izuku pulled his arm back, activating One for All, pushing the quirk to the maximum output. One for All. 100%. His arm crackled as red veins appeared on it as Izuku grit his teeth, his emerald eyes shining with determination. A large and dominating pro peeked his head around the corner. Seeing his protege fill his arm with the maximum amount of power he could hold, he grimaced. Young Midoriya. He hadn't been able to see the rest of the test due to being in a meeting with Nezu about not acting like Aizawa, skipping orientation to traumatize his students. He had been busy, so he wasn't sure how well Izuku had done so far. But he knew that his successor was about to overdo it. He almost felt the urge to intervene. But that would reveal their relationship. He couldn't do that. Izuku would have to do this on his own and deal with the consequences. Just don't get Recovery Girl too mad, please, young Midoriya. The edges of Izuku's lips turned up as he transferred the power from his arm to his finger. He remembered All Might's words from the day of the entrance exam. Squeeze your buttocks and from the deepest part of your soul yell. SMASHHH. He let go of the ball as he pushed on with his pointer finger, wind upturning. Some students being sent flying. Vlad King closing his eyes as sand whirled around. Monoma cackling as everyone's hair was rustled, and Yanagi tilting her head in wonder at Izuku. The dust began to clear and everyone looked at where Izuku was, still covered by dust. In shock, though Vlad and All Might were worried he had broken himself. Kan-sensei. The voice of Izuku was heard as the dust finally cleared, revealing a standing Izuku with a broken right index finger. I limited the pain, just like you said. He smiled with tears in his eyes. He had adrenaline in his system, but he still felt it. Vlad nodded in recognition, chuckling a little to himself. The kid is going to prove you wrong, Shouta. And All Might. When the crap did you get so cool, young Midoriya? Was gushing over his student. The class watched as the dust cleared. Midoriya was seen standing with his hand held, his index finger a morbid purple color. Monoma cackled wildly as the rest of the students gasped. Yanagi let a small smile come to her face. Izuku truly was interesting. Kan-sensei. They all heard Izuku's cracking voice, a sign that he was in pain. I limited the pain, just like you said. The boy cheered with a smile on his face, loud enough so the class could hear. Vlad nodded at the boy, a slight smile on his face. All right, Midoriya, 705.3 meters. He yelled out as the boy went to stand on the sidelines. Yanagi moving to take up the ball throw next. Vlad talked to him for a second, handing him a note to go to Recovery Girl after class and telling him where he could get replacement pants as his were torn during the 50-meter dash. Midoriya, my friend. Wonderful, that was absolutely wonderful. Monoma clapped him on his left shoulder with a smile. Izuku smiled a little at the praise. Though you didn't go all out, did you? Monoma asked with a smirk. The class gasped at the statement and Izuku rubbed the back of his neck with his non-broken hand. Well, Kan-sensei wanted me to minimize the damage, so I only used my finger to throw the ball, and that cost me distance on my throw. He trailed off. Monoma laughed again as he clapped Izuku's shoulder once more. Very well, Midoriya. He laughed. The nearby students stared at Izuku with wide eyes. He didn't go all out. The ginger stared at the brunette with wide eyes. She wasn't sure who between them was stronger. He couldn't go all out without hurting himself, it seemed, but if he did he could end any fight in one blow. She wanted to ask. Yeah, it was rude, but he didn't give a real good explanation earlier. What's your quirk? She asked the boy, cutting off the murmuring of the group of students as Yanagi finished her throw. The ghost-looking girl wasn't mad about the attention Midoriya was getting, even if no one had noticed her ball throw distance, which was decent because of her quirk. Midoriya was interesting. He wasn't cocky and had a quirk that seemed amazing. Though it broke him, his quirk was a form of super strength. It was almost as if his body wasn't used to his quirk. His strength was too much for his body. It was strange, but interesting, she decided. Izuku turned to the ginger girl and began to sweat nervously. And my quirk is superpower and it gives me. Yeah, Greenie. We heard you in class. But how? The green-haired girl with shark teeth interrupted him before he could finish. Izuku squirmed under the combined gazes of both girls. And that was because he didn't have a better explanation, but he would do his best to come up with one. One for all is a crystallization of energy, right? That's what All Might described it as. So the strength would be me using the energy in my limbs, so power up. It's better than anything else I've got. Izuku let out a shuddered breath. He could do this. He could lie. He lied to his mom when she asked about his injuries all the time anyway. Izuku sucked in a breath. Well, I don't exactly know. But my quirk is like a giant battery of stored energy. Whenever I get my super strength, I'm just using that energy. He explained. Monoma took the information and stored it away in his head with a smile. The girls and most of the class were enlightened but still rather confused. It was rather weird for a simple enhancer quirk, but quirks were rather confusing in and of themselves. Each one was unique and different, so it made sense. Distance run, we're not done yet. Vlad King yelled. The class halted what they were doing and all lined up for the distance test. Izuku did decently. He would have done better, but he had to nurse his broken hand for much of the event. He crossed the finish line with a huff for air. He looked across to see that Shishida, the girl with horns, and a couple of other kids had already finished. Everyone else trickled in and finished. They lined up and waited for Vlad King to say what he needed to. All right, we're all done here, so you can go home after you get your stuff from the classroom. He announced for the first time, not yelling. Be mindful of your scores. Be mindful of the way you used your quirks. Be mindful of the things your quirks cannot help you with. And be mindful of your weaknesses and work on increasing your strengths. He nodded, dismissing his class. Izuku sighed. He finally had time to rest. His body was screaming at him because of overuse. He finally had time to gauge his percentage output too, having a more accurate feel of 100% because of the ball throw. He estimated he had used 2-3% for most of the events, pushing it to 4 for the standing long jump and the grip strength test. It was a little annoying at how little he could use, but he could use it. He focused on that part. He could actually use the quirk now. The thought made him smile just a bit. It took a year after his initial meeting with All Might, but his dream of being a hero seemed actually attainable now. Izuku left soon after, deciding that he needed to go see Recovery Girl because of his broken finger and the stabbing pain his entire body was experiencing. Well, it was mostly his legs and arm, but that was neither here nor there. The class had gathered after changing in the locker room. Though Izuku was still with Recovery Girl, they were just talking with each other. The bell hadn't rung yet, so they still had to be on campus. It was mostly quiet. Some people were trying to talk with other, but none of them knew each other and they all were kind of tired. So what's up with that Midoriya guy? A boy, Senkaibara, asked aloud to the rest of the class as they all went to get their stuff before going home. It finally stirred up a conversation for the drained students to grab onto. I don't know, he's kinda weird but he's stupid strong. The headband boy, Yosuawase, said, had him in my practical during the entrance exam. A new boy, he's fucking strong, but also has some serious anxiety. The ginger, Itsuka Kendo, walked over. What do you mean? I mean besides that lame-ass stutter. The bug boy, Tagaru Kamakiri, not so subtly coughed out. Monoma sneered a little. This bug guy was really starting to get on his nerves. Yanagi frowned a bit. It is unbecoming of a hero to be so rude, or perhaps it just shows how narrow your mind is. While Midoriya-kun has a stutter, it should not dissuade anyone from befriending him, nor should it be used as a reason to bully him. Kamakiri-kun. Midoriya seemed nice. He hadn't called her weird or anything of the sort that most people at her old school did. And this boy decided he was weird or lame just because he had a stutter. I didn't ask for your pale-ass opinion. The boy yelled back. Monoma found himself frowning alongside Yanagi. Now, why don't we all calm down? We're classmates, so we're going to have to put up with each other the whole year. Let's not make any enemies of each other. Shishida tried to placate his classmates. Kamakiri scoffed and left the class. Well, that could have gone a bit better. The green-haired girl with shark teeth, Setsuna Takage, commented with a smile. But that ain't important. She whipped her hand around and pointed it at Oase. You, band, tell us about Greenie. Oase put his hands up. Fine, calm your tits. He huffed. The boy crossed his arms as he recounted the entrance exam. I didn't really notice the guy at all. He was really plain looking. But then the zero-pointer came out and started wrecking shit. Zero-pointer, Takage asked. What's that? My green-haired pal. You must have gotten in through recommendation. Monoma laughed a little. Takage made a face. Monoma was weird. The zero-pointer was a colossal-sized robot about the size of a 6 or 7-story building. It was advised we turn away from it during the test, as it was worth no points. Yeah, but Midoriya went to fight it anyway. He what? Kendo slammed her arms down on Oase's desk. Why? Why would he do something so stupid? The headband teen rested his head on his arms. Some girl was trapped under some rocks. The thing was gonna go right over her. He let out a sigh. He took the thing out with one punch. The class shivered at the thought. Most of them had seen the zero-pointer and the thing was ginormous. The fact that Izuku beat it with one punch, it was scary. Completely wrecked his arm though. The entire thing was purple all over, saw some bones sticking out too. Oase added as he remembered the guy after the exam. He was completely broken. The class shivered at the thought. They had seen how Midoriya's finger was, and imagined his whole body like that. Tetsu clenched his fist as he closed his eyes. Man that's so hardcore. He yelled and activated his quirk. Man midoriyas so cool. Not if it breaks him. Kendo yelled back. He was sacrificing his body for points. That wasn't good. And no one even knew about the rescue points, so he just threw away his body for nothing. Not if what breaks who. The entire class froze as they turned to the doorway, seeing Izuku now in his school uniform instead of the gym clothes and a bandage around his finger, a brow raised. The ginger straightened, looking for an excuse. I on nothing Midoriya. Kendo rambled. Izuku kept his eyebrow up in confusion, but did feel a bit happy that someone had remembered his name despite his horrible introduction. Monoma walked up and clasped his hand on Izuku's shoulder. Midoriya, you truly are magnificent. Absolutely wonderful. Izuku smiled a bit. Thanks Monoma-kun. He rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment at the out-of-nowhere compliment. See can I get my stuff? Ah yes of course Midoriya. Monoma cackled as he let Izuku go. The greenette smiled a bit. Monoma was weird but he was nice, at least nicer than 99% of the people he had met throughout his life. He grabbed his bag, smiling at Yanagi as he saw her and turning back around and heading for the door. Midoriya, mind if I accompany you? Monoma asked without the crazy for a second. Izuku of course nodded. Wonderful. Yanagi, will you be accompanying us? The blonde is the girl from across the room. Yanagi nodded after a second, floating her bag which was on her chair to her hands and joining the group. They all turned towards the class. Farewell for now. Goodbye. Bye. The three each said as they left. The class looked at the empty doorway, Kendo scrunching a brow wanting to run off after them. Izuku Midoriya. He's so strange, she muttered under her breath. The class filed out as the bell rang, the sound going out through the school and the halls coming to life soon after. Izuku smiled to himself as he, Monoma, and Yanagi chatted on their way off campus. It's quite surreal, is it not? Monoma asked aloud to the both of them. What is Monoma-kun? I believe he is referring to the fact that we are at UA. Yanagi told Izuku, to which Monoma nodded. And I will agree, it still does feel like a dream, she added. Izuku nodded at that. Why yeah, I understand that. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to wake up. And it all would have been for nothing. He trailed off, getting quieter the more he went on. Meeting All Might, learning the pro's secret, being saved by him twice, being offered a quirk, and then being personally trained by him. It was a scenario that he could only imagine in his wildest dreams. Both of his friends looked at him with wonder and confusion. His voice sounded so sincere and a tiny bit broken as well. Well, unless we're all dreaming at the same time and sharing said dream, I do believe it is unlikely that it is so. So you do not have to fret about waking up, Midoriya, Yanagi said to make her new friend feel better. Izuku smiled a little. Thanks, he said without a stutter. There is no need to thank me, Midoriya, it's simply what friends are for. No, she asked with a head tilt. Yanagi is correct, Midoriya, it's simply what friends are for. Monoma laid his hand on Izuku's shoulder with a smile. Yeah, thanks, there is no need for that, Midoriya, Yanagi reminded him. Alright, sorry. He smiled and let out a small chuckle. UA was everything it was chalked up to be and more. For once, Izuku felt like he actually had friends, and that was because he did have friends. Everything is different now. It was surreal, but not unwelcome. If I may inquire, how is your finger? Monoma asked as they passed the gate. Izuku showed him the bandaged digit. It hurts, but it's not broken. I'll have to go in for healing tomorrow though. I was too low on energy for recovery girl to fix it all, he explained, getting nods from both of his friends. Monoma is right, Midoriya. Thanks. I won't forget, promise. Izuku had a lot of fun talking with these two. They were a lot of fun and they actually wanted his input as well. Just being able to talk with people was so nice for him. They all arrived at the train station and they went their separate ways. Izuku smiled to himself as he arrived at home. His mom wasn't home yet, clearly still at work, but he couldn't wait to tell her about his new friends. That was nice. Next day, Izuku smiled as he met his friends at the gate, the three of them walking in together. So what do you guys think we'll be doing today? He asked the two of them as they went through the halls. They hadn't run into Kaken yet, which he was thankful for, but he knew that it'd eventually happen. Either during a school event like the sports festival or just randomly while wandering the school. Of course, he was incredibly nervous for when that would happen. But he felt confident in his ability to fight back. Plus, UA had been different from his other schools so far, so the teachers would surely do something if Kaken got out of hand, right? I hope. What exactly are you hoping for, Midoriya, if you don't mind my inquisition? Yanagi knocked Izuku out of his mumbling. Oh, and nothing. I was just thinking is all. He rubbed the back of his neck as he had a blush. Being caught in his mumbling was always so embarrassing. You know, Midoriya, my friend, I do believe you have to break that habit. What if villains heard you and were able to get information? Monoma rhetorically asked him as he flipped his bangs away dramatically. Alright, I'll try my best, Monoma-kun. He'd never thought about it like that, but Monoma was right. If someone was able to get information because he had a big mouth, then that'd be bad. He'd need to learn how to keep his mouth shut and information to himself. Monoma nodded a bit. Alright, well, as I was saying, the principal mentioned that our first heroics class with the mystery teacher would be Wednesday morning and 1As would be that afternoon. So today we'll probably do something with Kan-sensei. The thing is, the blonde didn't know what they'd do. He'd spent a lot of time thinking, but he couldn't come up with anything. What do you think he'll have us do if it's an exercise? He asked them both. Yanagi placed a finger on her chin as she thought, but she couldn't come up with anything besides basic introductions. They did that yesterday, but they were kind of rushed as they had orientation. I'm not entirely sure either. What are your thoughts, Midoriya? A quirk showcase, he answered quickly. Monoma rose a brow with a smile. And how did you come to that conclusion, my friend? Izuku had a hand on his chin, his brows scrunched, with his eyes looking ahead in thought. Just think about it. If we're going to be having an exercise tomorrow in class, then it'll be with each other. We know a little about each other's quirks, but not a whole lot. We need to find out what each other can do, limitations, abilities. Then we'll be able to have teamwork in our course exercises. Izuku felt an arm wrap around his shoulder and he was dragged into Monoma. That was absolutely wonderful, Midoriya. You truly are magnificent. Yeah, and Monoma-kun, I think why you're overreacting. He blushed at the praise. Alright, Inagi-chan. The Silverstein tilted her head at him. The thoughts you hadn't crossed my mind at all, Midoriya, so it is impressive to me as well. Izuku deflated as Monoma laughed. the three of them walking to class. They entered. The class wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. The three of them sat in their corner of the class. To Izuku's right, Kendo was talking with Takage at the green-haired girl's table. Yeah, it was some spiky blonde asshole. He called me a pebble. A pebble? Geez, the nerve of some of these guys. Takage huffed as she looked out the window, Izuku in the way of her vision, though she noticed he was incredibly stiff, almost like a statue. Hey Greenie, what's up? Izuku squirmed as her attention went to him. And nothing, just was listening to your conversation. Takage smiled a bit as she observed Izuku. He looked deep in thought. It was kind of cute. You know something about the spiky blonde asshole? By the way, Izuku locked up. She was guessing that he did know something. Monoma turned around in his chair. Midoriya, is this the same hooligan that we saw in the hallway the other day? He asked, the four surrounding waiting for Izuku to answer. He sighed. Yeah. Bakugo Katsuki. Quirk, explosion. He wants to be the #1 hero, but he doesn't know what a hero is supposed to be. Izuku muttered quietly and sadly. Takage raised a brow. Izuku was acting different. He had so much emotion in his voice yesterday with his stutters, with his smiling and crying during the test. He sounded so lifeless right now. What does he think a hero should be? Kendo propped herself on Takage's desk as she asked her question. Yanagi watched as his back hunched. He was nervous, that much was obvious. She wanted to make him feel better. It was obvious that this Bakugo person was the cause of inner demons for Izuku. But she didn't know anything about Izuku's situation. There was nothing that she could do. It made her frown. Izuku kneaded his hands together, thinking about his answer to Kendo's question. It was obvious, the same thing it had always been. Heroes save people with a smile. But, wasn't it more than that? He'd been thinking about it for a while. All Might had saved him twice a year ago, and he did save Izuku with a smile. But he also made Izuku feel safe with just his presence. All Might was a hero. He protected people. He made them feel safe. He saved people with a smile. He opened his mouth before he knew what to say. A hero should be a protector. He thinks heroes just beat up villains, but that's not it. They don't look for trouble. They just protect people in trouble. They should make people feel safe. At least ... that's what I think. He looked at Kendo with determined eyes. It was the first time he had stared at anyone like that. The ginger felt shred of respect grow for him as she nodded. All right, I think that's a good answer, Midoriya. She felt a smile come to her lips. She didn't even mean to smile. That is wonderful, Midoriya. Sure is, Greenie. Takage cheered. Gee, Greenie. Izuku asked about the nickname. Your hair's green, dum-dum. But so is yours. Izuku pointed at, staring at her hair. Takage smiled, standing up and ruffling Izuku's head. The boy blushed but didn't shove her away. It was kind of nice actually. I guess we're green buddies then, all right. Oh okay, all right, that's enough. Homeroom will now begin. Vlad King yelled as he strode into the room. Takage huffed and went to her seat, Kendo leaving to take hers. All right, today we will be having normal classes for you all later in the afternoon. But for now we will be having an exercise. Put on the gym uniforms and meet me at training gym Alpha. By how much the man yelled, Izuku would have expected him to have lost his voice. But he hadn't. The groups went to their own changing rooms, quickly getting into their gym uniforms before and heading out for gym Alpha. It was decently hard to find. After all, UA was like a maze, but Shishida had pulled out a map of the school and had led the boy to the gym, except Kamakiri. He went off on his own and was now probably wandering the halls looking for the gym. The boys entered, finding that the girls were already there, and apparently they had been waiting. Going by Takage's impatient tap at her foot. It's about time. What took you guys so long? Takage huffed as she crossed her arms. My apologies. We got lost and Kamakiri's protest held us back some time. Shishida apologized with a bow. Vlad strode into the gym, a nettled Kamakiri on his shoulder and a bag in his other arm. All right. We're going to be conducting a quirk showcase so your classmates can get a firm understanding of your abilities. We'll be going in alphabetical order. Awase, you're up. The teacher called out. Kamakiri flinched a little from how loud the man was. Being right next to his mouth didn't help. Both of Izuku's friends stared at him with wonder as he smiled and pulled out a notebook to write down notes. The pro put the boy down as the class gathered, Awase stepping out of the group. Sensei, I need items for my quirk. Awase was handed a bag. If anyone needs items for their quirk, collect something from this bag. The class nodded. Awase reached in and grabbed a coin and a baseball bat. My quirk is called Weld. I can bind any two items together, but I need to be touching both items for it to work. He put the coin in his palm and placed his hand on the bat. The class heard a noise and then he retracted his hand to show the coin stuck on a part of it now. Izuku's eyes lit up as he wrote down the quirk in his notebook. Monoma and Yanagi questioning where he even got it from but not asking as they were interested in what Izuku was saying. Does he need to use 5 points or can it be any point of his hand? Does he just use one hand or can he touch different items with each hand and then will they be magnetized to each other then connect? Is there a weight limit or a time limit? Does the binding wear off or is it indefinite? Can it be used on living organisms? Does it take up energy from him? If so, how much? And how many times can he do it? Izuku listed off as he scribbled in his notebook. It was kind of impressive how fast he could go without oxygen. He kept his questions to himself. He knew it'd waste time if he asked every question he had, so he decided not to voice them. He could find out more during the year, he just had to wait. The class moved on, Kaibara going on and showing his quirk Gyrate, which allowed him to rotate his limbs at high speeds. Next was Kamakiri. The bug-looking boy laughed as he stepped up. "So are you dumbasses ready to see my quirk?" He said it stated more like a statement than a question. He raised his forearm and from it a blade came out. Izuku shivered. He's too much like Kaken. He clenched his pencil, making it crack. He shook the thought away. He didn't want to think of one of his new classmates that way. It was rude. He grumbled before raising his hand. "Kamakiri-kun, I have a question." The boy looked at him for a second before sighing. "What is it?" stutter. The class went wide-eyed. The nerve that Kamakiri had was amazing. Kendo was going to slap him in all honesty. And she wasn't the only one either. Monoma also wanted to as well. Hell, he'd copy Midoriya's super strength and then do it. And Yanagi was messing with her hands to keep her emotions in check. But Izuku smiled instead. After all, it was nowhere near the worst he'd ever been dealt. Can you only grow blades from your arms or can you do it from any part of your body? Also, how long can you make your blades? He had to restrict himself to 2 questions, lest he want to get into a mutter storm. Kamakiri was surprised at the questions, but a little mad. "I can do it anywhere, and only about 1.5 feet right now." He seemed pissed at how short his blades currently were. "And how strong are they?" Izuku wrote down the information in his book as he looked up after asking the next question. Kamakiri felt like he was being broken down, observed and analyzed like a lab rat. He grit his teeth and answered, "I can't cut through concrete or brick. I've tried. It makes my blades dull." Kendo had the nerve to laugh at his face. Izuku's quirk seemed more useful now that Kamakiri's was broken down. Izuku nodded to himself. "Well, you need to focus on forcing your blades out even if it hurts. The more you do it, the more natural it will be. You can develop a fighting style of focusing on your forearm blades and throw in blades from other parts of your body to throw off your opponents. And if you keep on cutting things like rocks or concrete, I believe your blades will go stronger. Most likely they'll adapt to the stone, and you'll eventually be able to cut through it." The sentence finished in sync with Izuku's writing stopping, a small bit of smoke coming from his pencil lead. The bug boy stared at the boy in wonder. He thought Izuku was kind of worthless, super lame. But he figured out recommendations and then smiled an almost eerie smile. All right." Kamakiri went back to the group, staring at the smiling Izuku. It was official. Midoriya was weird, but not the bad kind. Just creepy. Kiwara was next, and his quirk was cool, if situational. Black allowed him to any dark-colored object, be it shadows or black pants, though right now he couldn't move the things he entered. Next, Kendo moved up and showed off Big Fist. She could grow the size of her fist and had incorporated it into a martial arts fighting style. It was genius, really. She'd fight normally and enlarge her fists mid-punch or post-punch to throw off opponents. Izuku's hand shot up. "Kendo-chan, how strong are you? Are your bones and muscles enhanced as well?" The ginger tilted her head and was also a little thrown off at being called Chan. She was always referred to as a tomboy. It was strange. "I don't know exactly how strong I am, and I don't know if my bones and muscles are enhanced either." Izuku wrote that down as he creased his brows. "Oh, why do you ask?" He looked up and tapped his chin with his pencil. "Well, how do your fists enlarge? Are new muscles created or do you have enhanced muscles that expand when you grow your fists? If so, then are your muscles when your hands are normal thicker than normal? If so, that'd make your normal fists stronger, as you'd have more muscle density." He explained. Kendo gaped as she thought about it. "I'll get back to you on that." "Okay, thank you, Kendo-chan." Izuku smiled and Kendo winced at how bright he was. Kodai, Komori, and Shizaki went next. Their quirks were interesting. Kodai could grow her size and the size of things she could touch. Komori could create and modify the properties of the mushroom, though she needed a good environment to create them. The more humid, the better. Shizaki could control and manipulate her hair, which were vines. Izuku wrote down his questions for all 3 of them, but he would wait to ask them, though he noticed that Komori was more nervous and shy than he was, and he wanted to make her feel better. But she was really shy, so approaching her out of the blue probably wasn't the best. Next was Shishida, whose quirk beast was really interesting. He had 2 forms, his normal and beast form. In his beast form he had increased strength but lowered intelligence. Izuku had some hypothesis that he'd wait to find answers to. Then there was Shota, who Izuku hadn't seen much of so far. But his quirk, Twin Impact, was amazing in Izuku's eyes. He could make a second impact of any hit he caused, which was usually stronger than the first. Then there was the foreign exchange student of the class, Ponitsuno Tori, whose quirk was amazing, but her Japanese wasn't good, which could cause problems for her, Izuku surmised. Maybe someone could give her tutoring lessons to help her. Communication is vital on the field during big events, like the sludge incident. Then there was Kosei Tsuburaba, who could create wind structures with his breath. Breathing exercises to increase lung capacity. Doing cardio exercises as well as swimming would help to do that. He wrote down, deciding to tell his classmate later. Then there was the overexcited Tetsu. Tetsu. His first name and last name are the same. Izuku dumbly wrote down, slightly imaging being called Midoriya. He wrote down the information for his quirk steel. He could transform the entirety of his body into a metal-like substance, though Izuku wasn't sure of the properties. Honestly, the name was misleading. And then it was Izuku's green buddy, whose confusing quirk lizard tail splitter was both amazing and confusing. Takage-chan, I have a question. Izuku had his hand raised. The girl pointed at him and winked. Shoot. After you disconnect your limbs from your body, they float. So can you float? He was shaking with anticipation. Oh no, can't. Izuku wanted to ask why, but he would wait and see if there was a better explanation for why not. He lowered his hand with a sigh. Okay. He sounded a little disappointed actually. The class had all realized that when it came to quirks, Midoriya was the guy. He had broken down kamakiris and had spoken about the theoretical science behind kendos. They all wanted him to analyze their quirks to see if there was anything interesting about them, but he hadn't opened his mouth since. Fukadashi, Honuki, and Bondo came up next. Their quirks were all interesting. Fukadashi had his quirk manga, which allowed him to make manga-like speech bubbles come from his head. Honuki, one of the 2 recommendation students for the class, softening, allowed him to soften and sink into things. And Bondo's quirk Semitine acted as basically a very strong glue. He wrote down everything, finding nothing important to note, though Fukadashi's had an amazing amount of potential. All right, now Monoma, it's my time, the blonde yelled as he strode to the front of the class, though he didn't touch anyone. The boy took an elegant bow, something an old-time European noble would do, not a traditional Japanese one, as he smiled at his class. As many of you saw yesterday, my quirk is copy, allowing me to copy anyone's quirks who I touch, though I cannot copy mutations. He explained simply, rising from his bow and reaching a hand out to the crowd. Do I have a volunteer? None of the class moved up, the majority not comfortable with their quirks being copied and others being mutant-type quirk bearers. I see. What about you, Midoriya? He turned to his green-haired friend. The boy choked up, the class turning to him. I don't know, Monoma-kun. My quirk B breaks my body. I don't think it's such a good idea. He trailed off, looking at Monoma with eyes of contemplation. Well, we do have Recovery Girl for a reason, don't we? Monoma smirked slightly. Right, Kan-sensei? The giant pro sighed. Monoma-kun, I would not recommend going out of your way to break yourself. It's not a good idea. It's not beneficial, and all you'll do is gain the old lady's ire. But perhaps it could help Midoriya with his own quirk. Isn't that something we should take into account? He spread his arms wide, as if making a grand presentation. Vlad bit his lip. He wanted Midoriya to succeed a lot, to stick it to Aizawa. He wanted that to happen so bad. Any insight into the boy's quirk would be wonderful, but this wasn't the way. Monoma-kun, pick someone else. Actually, Kan-sensei, I don't think it'd do anything. Izuku stated as he went to a page in his notebook. A page on his quirk. Though it was named Superpower instead of One for All and it didn't cover anything on the transferring aspect of the quirk. Vlad rose a brow as well as the rest of the class. Inagi tilted her head. Would you mind if we seek your knowledge in this instance, Midoriya? She asked. It was interesting to see how his mind worked. She wanted to know more. More about him, about what he liked, how he thought. Just more. Izuku nodded, skimming through his notes. Well, like I said yesterday, and my quirk uses a form of energy. And that energy is what enhances my body. Though, okay, he'd need to explain how the energy stockpiled without it seeming like he just magically gained a quirk from someone else. Thankfully, he'd been working on it. I believe that this energy has had to stockpile over time, building up until it actually became useful. It took so long that for the first 15 years of my life, I was thought to be quirkless. He closed his notebook and waited for any sort of reaction from his class. Though he didn't get any from most of his classmates, it just seemed like a passing statement. Monoma's eyes widened, and Vlad King didn't seem to be doing much better. Izuku continued, so I believe if you copy my quirk, you won't have any of the energy I use to power up, thus rendering it useless to you. He explained, getting a stiff nod from his blonde friend. Monoma felt a little bad. Izuku didn't know that his quirk copied the targets at an equal level of power, just without the knowledge to use it effectively, so he most likely would gain the energy his friend was talking about. Alright, Monoma, go back to the group, since Midoriya already explained his and his quirk has a glass cannon-like nature. Inagi, you're up. The ghost girl nodded and explained her poltergeist. Izuku took notes like usual, though there was the blonde, his teacher, and a couple other students sending Izuku worried stares. Quirkless. The ire the quirkless gained simply for existing was astronomical. so they had to ask, how much pain had Midoriya endured? Vlad cleared his throat, gaining their attention once again. Alright, class dismissed. Go change back and then go to lunch. After that you'll have your normal class, then you can go home. Eat a good meal for dinner. You'll have your first heroics exercise tomorrow. Vlad yelled as he strode out of the gym, the class leaving soon after. Sekijiro-kan was walking with a purpose as he strode into the teacher's lounge, practically slamming the door open. Aizawa, he yelled in anger. The teachers that were there shook in fear at the random jump scare, Midnight spilling her tea. Kan, what the heck? The teacher growled as he stared at the caterpillar sleeping on the floor. He went over and forcefully opened it up and brought the hobo-looking man out of it. Hey partner, why don't we calm down, eh? No reason to get all cranky with each other. Snipe stood up and tried to placate Vlad. The man growled in response. The cowboy hero backed off as he put his hands up, showing he wasn't a threat to anybody. Finally, the hobo-looking man decided to wake up. Vlad, what are you doing? He asked in a dead voice. The white-haired pro turned to Aizawa with a glare. Arrogant. You called him arrogant, Aizawa. He's the exact opposite of that crap. He shook Aizawa as he had him by the collar. Who are you talking about? Aizawa narrowed his eyes, having a small idea of who was being mentioned. He was starting to get annoyed. Being so emotional when being a pro hero, it was illogical. Letting your emotions get the better of you when you were in such a profession. It was something only a fool would do. Midoriya, damn it. You called him arrogant for not training his quirk. He thought he was quirkless for 15 years, damn it. Vlad grit his teeth. Aizawa could clearly see how much anger was held in his eyes. You judge anyone you deem unworthy of being a hero. But you didn't know anything about Midoriya. How many other hero hopefuls have you deemed unworthy? And how many of them have become villains? The pros which were resting were now invested in what was happening. Yamada was quietly sipping his coffee, staring at the two. And Nezu was in his office, watching the whole display with a smile. Though Sekijiro is being a little more violent than I expected, I do believe this will be a humbling experience for Shouta. He quietly sipped at his tea, a content smile on his face. His eyes glinted happily as his smile stretched just a bit. Seeing Aizawa start to get a little annoyed was a joyful experience. The white-haired man bit back a growl. His quirk requires an energy that his body generates over time. He was treated as a quirkless for 15 years. Do you have any idea what kind of torment he could possibly have received? He brought the man closer till they were centimeters apart. Aizawa narrowed his eyes. And how is that my fault? You're a teacher at UA. You're supposed to do background checks. You said you would take care of the top 10 examinees. Nezu gave you those because you said doing the rest with us was too much of a hassle, and you couldn't even handle that. He shook the man a little. His anger was overtaking him. Even he knew that. Aizawa clenched his fist. Well, I'm sorry that I'm busy when I'm not in school. Unlike the rest of you, I take my patrols seriously, he stated monotonically. It was 10 people, doctor reports, past schools, grades, behavior reports, and records. That's all you needed to do. Is that too much to ask? He felt his hands clenching harder at the man's collar. What if it is? I don't need to waste my time with someone who can't even use their quirk right, Aizawa said through clenched teeth. Vlad was about to punch him in the face. Excuse me, Aizawa-kun. The tension was broken when they all heard the high-pitched voice over the intercom. Vlad clenched his teeth. There was more to do, more to say, but he dropped Aizawa. The man brushed his clothes. What is it? The man looked up towards the intercom in the corner of the room. Can we talk for a moment in my office? You don't have afternoon classes, so I believe you'll be free. They all could hear the smile in the rat's voice. The messy man sighed as he stepped past Kan, sending him a glare and briefly activating his quirk before leaving. The remaining teachers all looked at Kan. Io, so what was that about? Code Violet in the cafeteria. Can we get one teacher to the cafeteria, please? A robotic voice came over the intercom. It was distinctly monotone compared to Nezu's overly joyful tone. The pros on break all sighed. Of course, that one annoying kid every goddamned year. I swear, partner. Snipe leaned back in his chair, many of the rest copying him. Not it. Not I. I'll handle it. Midnight stood up and sighed. She loved kids, she really did, but they could be so annoying sometimes. I'll go with you, Nem. Yamada took a drink of his water, getting his throat ready if he had to yell. The two left the teacher's lounge and Vlad fell onto the couch with a sigh. You good partner. Snipe sipped his drink. How he did that through his mask I have no idea. Vlad stared at the sharpshooting hero before sighing. No. Izuku hummed happily as he and his friends walked to the cafeteria. This time though they were joined by Takage and Kendo. The greenette had said something about green buddies sticking together and the redhead followed her friend. They all got lunch and sat together, and it was weird for Izuku. He'd never had something like this, never had a group of friends to call his own. But Yanagi had never once been rude to him, even though she basically knew he had problems with his stuttering and nervousness. Monoma was overly friendly, and was always complimenting him. It was nice. And while he hadn't seen much of Kendo yet, she seemed respectable. She seemed kind to him, and she had a warm face to her. She didn't seem mean at all. They got into line and Izuku gushed over lunch rush and asked for the man's autograph. "Hey, can someone tell me where Greenie got that book from?" Takage asked the rest of the group as Izuku was too busy compiling all of the Cook Hero's accomplishments, the pro blushing a little at the praise. "As much as I would like to inform you of the origins of Midoriya's notebook, I'm afraid to inform you that I have absolutely no clue as to where he derives it from," Yanagi answered as Izuku smiled happily as he took his book back from lunch rush. The Greenette happily got lunch and the rest of the group did as well. "So does anyone else notice that Midoriya just seems to brighten anyone's day?" Kendo asked as they looked for a table. Izuku smiling at any passersby and making them smile back. "You'd think it's a quirk or something," Takage muttered as they found a table. They all sat down, Izuku and Monoma on one side and the girls on the other. They had all started eating when they noticed Izuku staring at another table, his entire focus on it. "Midoriya, is something the matter?" Monoma asked his friend as he grabbed his shoulder. Izuku's focus seemed to return. Sorry Monoma-kun, give me a second," Izuku drawled on as he got out of his chair and left the table. "What's he doing?" Takage watched him leave towards a table with only one girl sitting at it. She grumbled before detaching an eye and an ear, sending them over to see what was going on and listening. "I'll tell you guys what's going on." "Takage, you can't do that," Kendo chastised, but it was too late. She could already see the smile on her friend's face as her ocular and hearing devices tracked Izuku. The Greenette approached a table with a lonely brunette, her long bangs covering her eyes, her mouth set in a frown. He locked up, a bit nervous at going out of his way to talk to a girl, but he sucked it up and took a deep breath. He steeled his nerves before sitting down in front of Komori at her lone table. The girl squeaked in surprise at someone sitting down with her. She got ready for mocks or anything of the sort, but then she noticed it was Midoriya, the only person who was as shy and nervous about stuff as she was. "Hi, Komori-chan." He cursed his stutter. He thought he had been doing better, but it all came back with a vengeance. But he kept a friendly smile on his voice. "Hi Midoriya-kun." "How is the weather?" Komori wanted to hit herself over the head with the hardest mushroom she could make. "It's pretty good. Not too hot, not too cold." Well, that's good." She smiled a little. He didn't laugh at her terrible conversation skills, so that made her happy. She saw Izuku's face locked up in contemplation. He was kneading his hands too. She gulped and decided to go for it. "Is something bothering you?" She kept her hands in her lap. She was messing with them. This was the longest conversation she had held with any of her new classmates. It was nerve-wracking. Izuku locked eyes with her. They looked like ones of understanding to her. Do you want to sit with us?" He motioned towards the table with everyone else at it. "He's got the moves." Takage smacked the table. "What do you mean?" Kendo squinted her eyes as her friend grinned. "I'll tell you later." Komori locked up, speechless at the question. Really?" She shot up out of her chair and almost fell as she reached over and grabbed Izuku's hand. Tears spilled out of her eyes, though Izuku couldn't see because of her bangs. The Greenette blushed but nodded. "Why yeah, you looked lonely, and I didn't tell like that." He responded as she let go of his hand, realizing how forward it was. But only if you want to." I want to," she immediately said. Izuku smiled, making her heart thump as he grabbed her plate. "Come on." Takage laughed as she smacked the lunch table. "I didn't know Greenie was so smooth." Kendo and Yanagi were still wondering what was going on, but Monoma had pieced together what he could. Though knowing Midoriya, he might be doing everything by accident and not even realize it. Takage stopped and deflated. "You're probably right on that one, Blondie." They all turned to see Izuku and Komori walking over, the two awkwardly making conversation as they both weren't sure on how to have a conversation with someone as equally bad at conversation as they were. And then Izuku heard the distinct sounds of explosions. Before he knew what was happening, he threw Komori out of the way and felt the force hit his side and then the coldness of the floor. "What the hell are you doing, you damn Deku?" The yell cut through the cafeteria. Komori, who was now on the floor after Izuku shoved her away, looked on in horror as Izuku looked on in fear at his tormentor. "It's that hooligan. That blonde prick." Both Monoma and Takage yelled in sync as their group got out of their chairs. "Kendo going to help Komori. Are you okay?" she asked the shorter girl as she helped Komori up. The brunette nodded but was solely aware of Izuku and how afraid he seemed to be. He's shaking," she pointed out, Kendo looking at her in confusion before looking at Midoriya. He was more than shaking. He wasn't moving to defend himself, he was just going to take it. Monoma came to them and quickly tagged her on the arm before running to his friend in danger. It took a moment, but Kendo realized what he had done. "Monoma," the ash blonde picked Izuku up by the collar. "What gives you the right to think you can sit in the same arena as me? You're nothing." He sent his arm forward, hitting Izuku in the stomach, and then activating his quirk. The Greenette winced, feeling the familiar sensation of his clothes tearing and his skin being burned. He was sent backwards and hit the floor once more. He brought his hand up and felt his stomach. The muscles that were there were definitely bleeding. He felt it. I am be bleeding. Please don't be too bad. He looked up and saw the crazed red eyes of Kaken. He squeaked out, his voice clearly showing his fear with its high pitch. He saw the manic smile scared him, but he was ready to receive anything that the boy would do. And then Bakugo was hurled away by an enormous fist. Monoma and Takage stood defensively in front of Izuku while Yanagi made sure he was okay. Are you insane? Attacking another student unprovoked in the middle of the day. Monoma's fist shrunk down as he tapped Takage on the shoulder. The greenette nodded as she understood what Monoma was doing. My quirk's hard to use, be careful, she muttered, the blonde nodding in return. Bakugo stood back up and glared at Monoma. The hell, get out of my you blonde fuck. He had his hands out in fury, his quirk showing off with popping explosions. The surrounding students finally started reacting. A blue-haired boy from Wana coming up behind Bakugo. You hooligans, what are you doing, ganging up on one of our students? He yelled. Kendo glared at the boy. If you actually paid attention, you'd realize he attacked one of our students out of nowhere. She yelled, feeling the urge to use her quirk on the bespectacled blue-haired boy. Komori ran to Izuku's side, kneeling next to him and producing a mushroom. Midoriya-kun, eat this, it acts as a painkiller, it'll make you feel better. The boy managed to sit up on the floor and took the mushroom, their handing being connected for a brief moment before he ate it. They shouldn't be getting involved in my mess. He looked at the two standing in front of him, defending him. To the side to see Komori looking worried at his bloody stomach, and then to Yanagi who was holding him up to make sure he didn't slump down to the floor. He sighed as he stood up, Komori yelping in protest and Yanagi telling him to rest. But he stood up anyways. He grabbed Monoma's shoulder, the boy looking back to see Izuku smiling bittersweetly. It's fine, Monoma-kun, don't worry about it. Izuku's smile stretched a bit, so obviously fake. But Midoriya, it's fine. His voice seemed to break as he walked past his friends. That was still strange, but it was nice. They were willing to defend him, even if he didn't want them to. The coward's come to fight me himself. Bakugo laughed as his quirk made more explosions. With each one Izuku flinched and folded in on himself, remembering a distinct beating each time. It was now that the glasses-wearing blue-haired teen realized what was going on, and found the contestant that had completely outperformed him in the entrance exam. Bakugo-kun, it's not well to start fights with our peers. He tried to fix it. Kendo bit back a laugh. Only now was the guy trying to be useful. Bakugo didn't pay attention as his manic smile only seemed to get bigger as he prepared to launch off and show Deku his place. The smell of his smoke was so familiar. Seeing Deku's crying face, it was nostalgic. And then he caught the faintest smell of some perfume before it expanded and he felt his eyes closing. The fuck? He got out before falling to the floor. All right. A distinctly feminine voice made the hormones of the surrounding boys to go wild. The sound of a whip cracking against stone followed soon after, making a shiver run down their spines. What's going on? The R-rated hero Midnight stood in the cafeteria, the voice hero, present mic by her side. Both of the Wana students had passed out, as they were the closest to the pro. Though she didn't send out much of her quirk, as to make sure not too many people passed out, it was enough to make them fall asleep. Izuku was frozen. Midnight was one of the coolest heroes. Of course now wasn't the best time to gush about pros, but he knew he was about to open his mouth and gush, before Monoma stepped forward. MS, Kayama. Monoma bowed, his voice oddly formal for once. He rose from his brow. This he had to bite himself back from calling Bakugo a hooligan or worse. Person attacked my friend, Midoriya, when he was returning to our table. He explained. Midoriya was accompanied by someone else. He pushed her away. And then he was hit by this boy's quirk which seems to allow him to create explosions. They all saw Midnight wince at the last part, her eyes traveling over Izuku and finding his bloody stomach. She pinched her nose and sighed. All right, Midoriya, go to recovery girl. We'll take care of Bakugo. What about this other boy? Was he involved at all? He wasn't, ma'am. All right, Zashi, you handle everything here. Make sure nothing else happens, she said to her fellow pro, the blonde nodding as she left with Bakugo under her arm like a surfboard. Midoriya, right. Present Mike stepped up to the green-haired one. Here, a slip for the nurse's office. He handed Izuku a pink slip, though he noticed how happy the kid looked. You all right? Can I have your autograph? He was in a 90-degree bow, with a book that came from who knows where outstretched, open to a page of Present Mike doing his famous YEAHHH pose. The pro laughed, ringing a couple of people's ears in the process before signing, sure thing little listener. The blonde smiled a bit at the kid. Now go to the nurse's office. Yes, sir. Komori bumped Izuku's arm, bringing the surrounding attention to her. She blushed a bit before turning to present Mike. I'm sure I had Midoriya ingest a mushroom from my quirk. Will I need to talk to her as well about that? Her voice was quiet, but the blonde pro heard her easily enough. He scratched his cheek. Probably yes, I'd go just to make sure. Oh, okay. The two turned towards the rest of the group. Worry not, my friend. Just go make sure you are all right. And perhaps we could go get food after school since you weren't able to finish your lunch. You're welcome to come as well, Komori-chan. They both nodded, Izuku smiling a bit at the change of pace from middle school before leaving, Komori hurrying to follow after the taller boy. They were walking the halls, Izuku already knowing where the office was so he didn't need a map. Komori fiddled with her hands, glancing at Izuku. His smile was gone now. He didn't look sad, just kind of dead. She raised a hand, retracting it before steeling herself and grabbing onto his sleeve. The greenette stopped in his tracks and turned to her. Is something wrong, Komori-chan? He sounded so quiet, but still kind like he had always been. What does Deku mean? She decided to ask that question, but she felt terrible when he seemed to deflate. I'm sorry if it's sensitive for you. He shook his head as they kept on walking. It's fine. Really, he sighed as he thought about it. He didn't know much about Komori, but she seemed really nice so far. Maybe he could tell her. He wanted to find people that he could trust, that he could be friends with. He wanted friends, and seeing Komori's banged face, it reminded him of the nice girl from the entrance exam. She was friendly and she smiled. I haven't seen Komori-chan smile like that. Komori didn't smile. That much was obvious to Izuku. I'll make her smile. He turned to the brunette and let out a small smile. It's just an old nickname. You could read my first name like that. It means. He trailed off, not wanting to say it. Useless, Komori asked, and he nodded. They returned to silence as they kept on walking. Well, I think that's the farthest from the truth, for what tea that's worth. She spoke quietly as she kneaded her hands. Izuku looked at her, tears brimming at her words before smiling widely. Thanks, Komori-chan. Why, you're welcome. Komori responded as they arrived. Izuku sighed before sliding the door open. Recovery girl. Oh, for both teens heard the old lady's yell as she hopped off of her chair and strode to the door. Izuku flinching as she readied her cane to smack him. Give me one good reason not to smack you right now. And Midoriya was attacked. Please, don't. Komori stood in front of Izuku like a shield. She flinched at the cane, but the old lady huffed and put it down. All right, get in here, you buffoon. You forgot to come into my office for your finger this morning. Izuku went rigid as he remembered what he was supposed to do. He even told Monoma and Yanagi that he wouldn't forget. He sat down on the bed. So is there anything I should know? Why are you here? Recovery girl turned to Komori. The brunette squeaked, I can make him mushrooms. I gave him one that was basically a painkiller. She explained. Recovery girl nodded. All right, that shouldn't mess with my quirk at all. She walked to her desk and pressed a button. A robot with clothes in its hands came in. For you, Midoriya. The boy took them, a little sad that they were the perfect size. He let out his hand. The nurse kissed it and his index finger returned to its original state. I didn't even realize it was in pain. That's a bad thing. His stomach healed as well, the blood wiped away by Recovery girl with a rag. All right, now change and get out. Yes, ma'am. Izuku seemed deflated as he took off his clothes, hearing a yelp in the corner. He perked his head up in that direction, coming eye to eye with Komori. I'll get out. The girl squeaked, slamming the door as she left. He gaped for a couple seconds, looking at the closed door before he slowly and quietly put on the new uniform, handing the broken one to the robot on duty. It rolled away after. I'm so dumb. Recovery girl didn't comment on his stupidity as he robotically made his way to the door, only briefly saying, don't come back this week, to which he made no promises. He exited and found Komori leaning on the wall, a small blush on her face. I am sorry, Komori-chan. He was as quiet as a mouse. The girl shook her head. It's fine, Midoriya-kun. Let's go back to C class. He nodded and they quietly walked back. They entered the class. Ectoplasm was up on the board teaching math. Sorry we're late, sensei. They both bowed and class resumed, though there were just more questions up in the air. From the quirk showcase to the incident in the cafeteria, there were just more questions to ask. What was up with Izuku Midoriya? The day ended and Izuku sighed as the final bell for the day went off. The class all got out of their seats, either stretching, talking with someone, or leaving was what everyone was doing. So, where do you all wish to convene for some cuisine? Yanagi inquired as their group all got together. She tilted her head at the group. Takage wrapped her arms around Monoma and Izuku's shoulders. I don't know, don't really care. Maybe some pizza, but it would be gentlemanly of you guys to pay, right? Takage, don't be like that, Kendo muttered. The greenette didn't budge though. Izuku was too busy blushing to actually respond while Monoma sighed. If that's what you wish for, I could very much pay for dinner, though you'll have to pay next time. Do we have a deal? Deal, Takage exclaimed, letting go of both boys. All right, you all have told your parents or families why you'll be out, correct? Monoma asked the group. They all heard a choking sound as Izuku hastily pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Takage smiled as a devious idea came to mind. Izuku heard barely one ring go off and the phone picked up. Izuku, sweetie, is something wrong? You almost never call. She sounded worried. All of the group heard her despite Izuku not having it on speaker. The boy winced from the loudness. Why, yeah, Mom, I'm fine. I was just going to go with some friends to get some food and hang out. I just wanted to let you know. He sighed in relief at hearing her calm down. Oh okay, will have fun sweetie, okay. She sounded really happy. In all honesty, she was overjoyed that he was making friends, and was relieved that Yue wasn't the same as Aldera. I will, thanks mom. He smiled at how happy she sounded. Had he not bringing friends over worry her that much? He was going to hang up until Takage pounced on him. The shark teeth girl threw her arm around Izuku's shoulder. All right, come on Izuku, bye Mamadoriya. She smiled and hung up for Izuku. Though the split before the line went dead, they all heard a scream and a thump. Mom passed out. Izuku sighed as he stuffed his phone. He knew she didn't have work today. Maybe sleeping would be good for her. Hopefully. He turned to Takage, not even noticing that he still had a blush on his face. See Takage-chan. WY. The greenette put her hands behind her head and smiled. What? We're friends. It's fine if I call you Izuku, right? She seemed completely carefree at the fact that she most likely had made his mom pass out from surprise. He wasn't sure the exact medical cause. Izuku rubbed the back of his head, and he still had a blush on his face. No one had ever called him Izuku before. Well, besides his mom, but that didn't count. It was kind of embarrassing. But he had never had friends before either. Was this just something friends did? He didn't know, but he wasn't afraid to try. As sure, if you want to. He looked away, trying to hide his tomato face. Yanagi tilted her head as she floated beside him, pushing him so they could start walking to leave the building. May I refer to you as Izuku as well? She asked. The boy went ramrod straight but nodded his head. They're gonna kill him, poor guy. Kendo sighed as the group left out the doors. Monoma shooed both girls away, Takage pouting and Yanagi moving to float next to Monoma so she could still be near the greenette. Worry not Midoriya my friend. I'm sure your mother will be alright, and if Takage here goes too far, come to me. Monoma advised as he tapped Izuku's shoulder a bit. Izuku smiled a bit. Will do, Monoma-kun. They found a pizza place. It was cheap for a group like them and offered a lot of variation without much cost. Monoma had gotten a cheese pizza. Kendo and Takage got a normal pepperoni. Komori got one with mushrooms on it. Yanagi ordered a special called the mystery pizza and Izuku got. Okay, the fuck, what is that? Takage cursed as Izuku got his food. The greenette rose a brow as he started eating. What? Is something wrong? The recommendation student deadpanned at his food of choice. No, nothing at all. Just me realizing you're a psychopath. She commented. Izuku now noticed that everyone was looking at him weirdly. What did I do? He asked with a slight raise in his voice, honestly worried that he had done something to ruin his new friendships. Nothing too bad, my friend. But really, pineapple on pizza. I doubt even Wano would do something so heinous. Monoma commented and Izuku looked dumbfounded. But pineapple on pizza is good. How could you say that? It clashes with the pre-established texture and flavor. But that's what makes it so good. It's official. Greenie's insane. Izuku found himself smiling as they bickered. They weren't trying to make fun of him or his tastes. It was just friendly banter. It wasn't something he had a lot of, but it was something he hoped to have more of in the future. Earlier at UA, Aizawa sighed as he entered Nezu's office. He was grateful that he was able to get out of an illogical situation. Izuku Midoriya was a glass cannon and would be useless in the field, but apparently Ken didn't see it that way. He was living a fantasy. Nezu, what did you need? Code Violet in the cafeteria. Can we get one teacher to the cafeteria, please? The alarm blared in the small rat's office, said being having a growing smile. Well, I do wonder what that is about. Shall we check? Aizawa-kun. The man tilted his head and he could audibly hear his employee gulp. I have him on a rope. You are quite the fun one, Aizawa, though you don't realize when you've gone too far. The man shook his head. No, if it's all right with you, I'd rather not waste time. Oh no. Please, I do insist. It won't take up too much time. Nezu pushed a cup of hot coffee over his desk. The hobo-looking man instantly began eyeing it. Fine. He sat down in the chair opposite Nezu's desk and he swore he saw the rat's teeth glint. The mouse pulled up a video on one of his monitors, turning the device so Aizawa could see. It was security camera footage of what was currently going on in the cafeteria, and it was focused on one person in particular. The illogical and useless glass cannon. Aizawa sighed. Was Nezu trying to teach him a lesson or something? Because nothing was happening. He was just talking with some girl, nothing important. Sir, I value my time, I'll be leaving. Oh, but you'll miss the best part, Aizawa-kun. The pro swore that the principal's smile stretched just a tad bit again. He decided to entertain Nezu for a bit, even if it was a waste of time. Both Midoriya and the girl left her table, going to anyone where he presumed Midoriya's friends were. And then all hell broke loose. He saw a distinct piece of blonde hair come out of nowhere and attack Midoriya. The principal had even graciously turned the audio on so he could hear their conversation. Yells, cursing, the word Deku, that and more was thrown around, the smaller boy shaking in fear. His friends went to help him and Ida chastised them for attacking Bakugo. I swear that kid. He could tell Ida was going to be a handful. He acted like a superior to everyone, but he wasn't. But that wasn't anywhere near Bakugo's superiority complex. The boy thought he was the best of the best, the next #1 hero. But he had a strong quirk, so Aizawa was willing to overlook any behavioral flaws. Midoriya had a strong quirk, but it broke him, and on top of that he was completely reckless. He had a heroic streak but couldn't back it up. But from what he was seeing right now, Bakugo and Midoriya were the complete opposite of each other. Midoriya had a heroic streak, and Bakugo had a villainous one. He glared at Nezu. What's the point of this? The rat's smile dropped and he sighed. Aizawa-kun, you have cost my institution many applicants. You expelled your entire class last year. They weren't worthy of the hero track. And you were. Nezu stared at him and his smile began to form again. If I remember correctly, you were in general studies when you first began? No. He was prodding, and he knew that. And it was oh so fun to do with Aizawa. And in the entrance exam you weren't able to do much of anything as well. Aizawa's face was getting dangerously close to a scowl. And he loved it. Those tests are geared towards people with combative quirks. Mine does nothing against robots. Aizawa bit out. Ah yes, of course. However, you could have gotten rescue points like many of our other applicants, like Midoriya did. Nezu smiled. He knew he was getting the underground hero riled up. But you didn't, Aizawa-kun. I'm done with this. Nezu. Both occupants heard the cheery cry as Midnight strode into the principal's office. Ah, Miss Kayama, how's Bakugo-kun holding up? The principal turned his attention away from Aizawa as they all stared at the passed-out blonde in the R-rated heroine's arms. Well, he hasn't woken up, so that's good. She smiled as she plopped the boy down in a chair next to Aizawa. Thank you, Miss Kayama. Your excuse so you can go now if you want. Midnight slowly nodded. I think I will. She sent Aizawa a glance before sighing and taking her leave. Shouta, you're digging your own grave. Nezu's gaze turned back to the tired hero as the door to his office shut. Aizawa, please wake him up for me. Nezu ordered and the pro obliged. He knew he was on thin ice already and he didn't want to make his situation any worse than it already was. He stared at the boy for a second before sighing and blowing some air into Bakugo's ear, the boy jolting awake. Fucking DEK, where in the fuck am I? His voice still sounded angry but also held confusion as well. He turned to the side to see his weird-ass hobo teacher and to the front to see a creepy-looking rat thing. Who in the fuck are you? There is no need to yell, Bakugo-kun. I can hear just fine. Nezu commented as he smiled widely. And who am I? Am I a mouse, a bear, a dog? I'm the principal of UA, Nezu. The mouse's grin showed his satisfaction as Bakugo's eyes widened. So, you will behave with me. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I don't have to do jack shit. Bakugo, Nezu interrupted, his smile stretching once again. He was having so much fun today. Your seat in the hero course, no. Your spot at UA is at risk here. You attacked another student unprovoked. It's just Deku. The blonde yelled back, like it was an answer. To him, it was. It always had been and in his eyes. Always would be. That's not a good enough answer, I'm afraid. Nezu wanted to smoke right now. The boy was so childish. He was a child, so it did make sense. But he was acting like a spoiled 5-year-old and not a 16-year-old who was already on their way to adulthood. Is there any other reason you might have, Bakugo? Why do I need a reason to put Deku in his place? The blonde's yelling was getting annoying, but his face made Nezu chuckle. He looks more like an animal than I do. He nodded, because attacking someone unprovoked like you did, as well as using your quirk with a license, can put you in prison. I do have a detective friend on speed dial. Should I give them a call, Bakugo? The principal smiled so wide you could see his canines. Bakugo felt a shiver go down his spine as he flinched back. What? Go to prison for just goddamn you, Deku? He shook his head. He couldn't. He wouldn't go to prison just for putting Deku in his place. He didn't know why this rat bastard cared, but he wouldn't let it jeopardize his hero career. Okay, now keep quiet. The adults need to talk. Nezu turned to Aizawa. The man sighed and Nezu continued. Now Aizawa-kun, I'll be willing to forget about your little incident with Kan. However, you will have to make sure Bakugo-kun here behaves better. And no expelling students for the rest of this year on your own. Any expulsion requests go through me, is that clear? Aizawa gruffly stared at the principal's beady eyes. You couldn't find any emotion in the damn things. It felt like they were staring through you. Well, with Nezu's quirk he was staring through you, pulling you apart and finding what made you tick. He often made a game of it, and Aizawa hated it. Yes, understood. The gruff man got out as he stared with disinterest. Though inside he was sweating. He couldn't expel people anymore. Good, and Bakugo-kun. The mouse turned towards the student in the chair. The boy was grinding his teeth. He very clearly wanted to say something but held himself back. He didn't want to get expelled or arrested. Well, look at that. It can be respectful. Well, that's too much of a stretch. Nezu thought passively. If you pull anything like that again, you will be put in general studies. Anything after that and we will expel you and convene with other hero schools to make sure you can never apply to them. That is of course if the police don't decide to pursue you for criminal activity. The boy finally showed a different emotion besides anger, surprise. Nezu knew his type. Great and grand during the early stages of their life, everyone saying that they would be the greatest and so on and so forth. And then they got to the real world and learned what it was like. This is probably, no most definitely, the first time he's been reprimanded in school. He could audibly hear the grinding of the boy's teeth as he grit them. Eventually he nodded, wallowing in defeat. The principal clapped his hands together on his desk. All right. Now, as fun as this was, I do have business to attend to, so please return to your business, boys. Aizawa grunted in displeasure before standing. Bakugo, come, you have your lesson to attend to. Just a normal period where he had the kids do whatever they wanted outside since their first heroics class was tomorrow. The blonde stood up and left with Aizawa, a scowl on his face the entire time. The door closed behind the two and Nezu's smile dropped. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it, jumping out of his chair and standing at the window behind his desk. He let out a puff of smoke and sighed. Computer, pull up the school record of number 6 applicant Izuku Midoriya. He spoke aloud and his monitor changed before Izuku's record was shown. He turned to look at it. The previous school shown being listed as Aldera Junior High. Izuku had many admonishments from his teachers. Too loud in class, causes too many fights, disruptive, the list went on. A mouse hummed. So far Midoriya had seemed like none of the above. Computer, pull up the school record of number 1 applicant Katsuki Bakugo. The screen changed and the saddened face of frowning Midoriya was replaced by the cocky and prideful face of a smirking Bakugo, the same school being listed. He read and his eyes widened. Bakugo had a clean record. He let out another puff of smoke as he thought aloud. No, that can't be right, that can't be right at all. He gazed out his window again, staring down the city of Musutafu, absent-mindedly in the direction where Aldera Junior High was located. Computer, call All Might in. A few minutes later, came in the symbol of peace himself. Now most would expect a giant man with biceps the size of Elastigirl's A, something relatively big like a truck or Bakugo's ego. But instead, what came in was a skeleton of a man who was giant in terms of heights, but looked like he had suffered from malnourishment on top of using surgery to cut his fat off his bones. Ah, Nezu, did you need something, my old friend? All Might asked as he took a seat at a pair of couches. Nezu came over with a cup of tea and sat opposite him after handing the cup to him. Yes, in fact I did. You picked Midoriya, correct? The mouse smirked as All Might sputtered, choking on his tea. I will take your reaction as a yes. The Mosk smiled as All Might cleaned himself up. All Might cursed himself. Of course Nezu knew. Nezu knows everything. But he did have to wonder what gave it away. Thoughts for another time. He sighed. Why yes, young Midoriya is my successor. Why do you ask? Had Midoriya done something to catch Nezu's eye? If so, the gaunt man would hold a cross and pray for the boy. I just have a few questions to ask about your time with him leading up to my entrance exam, if you don't mind, of course. The mouse stirred a cup of coffee. Caffeine was horrible for his body, but he knew he'd be spending a long time awake today. The tall man waved a hand. Of course, ask away. Nezu nodded as he stared at his reflection. Did Midoriya ever mention his schooling, how his education was going? The mouse stared as All Might developed a look of thought, putting a hand on his chin. He shook his head eventually. No, I don't recall him ever mentioning anything like that. Why do you ask? The mouse hummed as he took a sip of his coffee, instantly feeling a surge of energy due to consuming too much for his small body. But it didn't matter. There was an incident today. Did young Midoriya get in trouble? All Might instantly asked and Nezu shook his head. He's very protective of Midoriya, and they've only known each other for about a year. Intriguing. He shook the thought away and opened his mouth. No, the incident revolves around another student which attacked him. Someone what? The buff form of said hero took the skeleton's place as a cerulean orb stared Nezu down. Names, I need. The student has already been admonished for his actions, and he knows very much the trouble that lies should he continue the path he's going down. The principal answered instead, staring at the pro with his dead eyes. It was funny seeing All Might angry, but now was not the time for it. They went to the same school. I checked their old records, and they don't make sense. The pro in front of him shrunk down and looked much more interested as he bent forward with his elbows on his knees and his hands together. His brow was creased to show his obvious anger. What did you find, Nezu? The mouse smiled. Midoriya had a file filled with marks for disrupting class and even starting fights. All Might narrowed his eyes. That couldn't be right at all. Izuku was the most heroic soul he had ever seen, besides his master. There was no way in hell he would be starting fights in school, and there had to be more. His attacker, not a single mark. Nezu smiled as he saw All Might scowl. He's shown large signs of anger issues as well as a superiority complex in my short meeting with him, so I know for a fact there is no way that boy would have a clean record. All Might nodded as he creased his non-existent brows. You suspect foul play? Yes. The pro nodded again. I'll see how young Midoriya is doing tomorrow after our heroics class and ask him about his old schooling. You can't do that, you buffoon. he'll realize we're onto something and then deny anything about his attacker. Nezu raised his voice. Midoriya was going to take a beating to defend his new friends. There's no way he'd tell us anything. All Might wanted to curse. This is so infuriating. He wanted to punch something. Nezu sighed. I know, but allow me to handle it. If there's anything you can help with, I will let you know. Now go, you have a patrol to do. The number 1 stood, straightened out his suit and nodded, his face showing his displeasure in not being able to do anything. All right, have a good rest of your day, old friend. To you as well, number 1. Nezu found himself smiling as the blonde left his office, but he also felt himself deflating. The blonde giant hadn't been of any help at all. He knew nothing. He sighed and moved towards his desk, sitting himself comfortably in his chair and pulling up his 7 monitors. He narrowed his eyes as he stared at both Midoriya's and Bakugo's records. Aldera Junior High. You have much explaining to do. Perhaps your camera system will help me. The entirety of UA staff heard the cackling coming from the top floor of one of the towers of their prestigious campus. All Might shivered as he walked away from his old friend's office. You never wanted to gain the interest of Nezu. It most times ended in pain or humiliation, sometimes a combination of the two, but it was always bad. Izuku Midoriya, once quirkless and now the disciple of Japan's top pro. Nezu smiled as he began to read more into detail into the boy's file. You are so very interesting. It always ended badly if you incurred Nezu's interest, but sometimes for the ones surrounded instead of the target of interest. Izuku smiled as his mom cried about him making friends. She was awake when he had gotten home, so that was a good thing. She had also mentioned wanting to talk to the person that called him Izuku and constantly asked if he had already gotten a girlfriend on the 2nd day of high school. Oh, my baby boy's all grown up. Next thing I know, he'll be married and have a big house and 3 kids. And Mom, I told you it's not like that. Takagi-chan just likes to tease people. It was something that he had learned about her. She found a lot of fun in teasing people. She liked getting reactions out of people, which for him meant that he was usually her target. Darn my terrible social skills and easy embarrassment, he thought as he observed his hero costume sketch. He had already gotten his costume. His mother had made it with everyday materials and lots of love, but it was most likely going to break if he ever wore it in a villain scenario. He had felt the material. It was thin and skin-tight when he wore it, and it didn't leave much to the imagination either, and he knew that it could have just been more full for Takagi to use against him. A thrown rock would most likely tear the fabric also. So he was designing an updated version of his decade-old original design. He had his pencil in hand as he went over his old design, trying to draw it with his better drawing skills that he now had. From there he would update parts that he didn't like, but he found himself stuck. He creased a brow. What can I change? He stared at the design before sighing. I'm not getting anywhere. He closed his notebook and rolled back in his chair, staring at the ceiling with tired eyes. I should get some sleep. We do have our first heroics class tomorrow. He got into bed and smiled as he went to bed, content with the softness of his bed. Monoma sighed as he still couldn't go to sleep. He had been thinking a lot about the ball of interest that was Izuku Midoriya. He had the power of seemingly a god, yet he was as humble as they come. He was a bottle of contradictions. And then there was what he mentioned during the quirk showcase. I believe that this energy has had to stockpile over time, building up until it actually became useful. It took so long that for the first 15 years of my life, I was thought to be quirkless. Suffering, that was something that Monoma knew a lot of. Not having a power to call his own had led to a lot of less than favorable instances for the blonde. But at least he had something. Being thought to be quirkless, he couldn't imagine the amount of pain his friend must have gone through. The blight of the quirkless was something that had long since become the norm, from before he had even been born. He sighed as he sank further into his bed. Then there was the boy's quirk hobby. He had perfectly understood all of their quirks even from just a little showcase and had ideas on how to improve them. Was that hobby due to never having one to call his own? And then there was the bully, Bakugo Katsuki. He had attacked Izuku out of nowhere for no apparent reason, or no reasonable reason at least, and it seemed like the norm. Izuku was ready to take a beating to defend them as well, as if he had been programmed or brainwashed to do so. It wasn't right. Monoma sighed as he closed his eyes. He needed to sleep for tomorrow. He had done enough thinking as is. Yanagi couldn't stop thinking about how to help Midoriya. She wanted to help him with his stuttering issue and have him smile more, help him get used to having friends, and perhaps help him with his quirk as well. He did smile a lot, but it was always small, hidden, and nervous. She wanted him to be able to let out a wide and bright smile, but she didn't know how to do that. She stared at her empty hand. She had held him with it when he was on the floor in pain. She wasn't able to do much. She didn't help him like Komori did. It made her frown as she messed with her wrists, a habit she had formed when she was dissatisfied with something. She pouted and floated a pillow over to her body and crushed it in a hug to find some comfort. She continued to massage her wrists, trying to think of something that could make him feel a bit better whenever he was sad. She sighed as nothing came to mind and put the pillow aside as she sat up in her bed, still messing with her hands. Her gaze drifted to her limbs as she continued to massage them. She rose a brow as a small idea came to mind. Perhaps a friendship bracelet would help to remind him that he's not alone, that he can come to me or Monoma for help. She nodded to herself and decided that she'd make one first thing in the morning. Hopefully her mother could assist her. She fell back into her bed. For the first time that night, her gray and white pajamas feeling extremely comfortable and soft as she closed her eyes. Next day, the trio all felt content as they met at the gate of UA. Though none of them felt like mentioning the things that had happened the past day, it was clear that Monoma and Yanagi weren't going to get much more from Izuku about this Bakugo person, whereas Monoma had taken to calling him that blonde hooligan. Despite this, both of them wanted to help their new friend and Yanagi wanted to give him the present she had made. So, what do you believe our first heroics exercise will be? Monoma asked as they entered the class. Unlike yesterday, almost everyone was in the class when they arrived and they were all chatting with each other just like the trio was. Yanagi placed a finger on her chin as she scrunched her brows. Perhaps a team exercise, though I cannot say for certain that's what it will be. What do you think, Midoriya-kun? The greenette didn't like being put on the spot, but he did know they were trying to include him, which was nice. I think a teamy exercise too, just so we can get to know each other and more. The three nodded as they took their seats, ready for anything that would be thrown at them. Takage smiled as she saw Izuku nervously sit down, stealing glances at her to see if she was going to say something. She waited until he finally sat down to open her mouth. Hey Greenie, how's your mom doing? Takage asked with a smirk as Izuku sat down. The boy sighed and threw a half-hearted glare her way. She's doing good, he muttered, pulling out his notebook so he could take notes during their exercise. Takage pouted at his lack of reaction. He was learning and she didn't like that. Yanagi watched what the two were doing and tightened her hold on the friendship bracelet she had made. All right, Vlad King strode into the class with a yell. Today you'll be having a heroics exercise with Nezu's mystery teacher. For now, however, spend homeroom as you all wish. The man crossed his arms at the podium, staying still as conversation broke out between the students. So who do you believe the mystery teacher is? Shishida asked the boy who sat behind him, a boy called Shota. I don't really know, but it can't be anyone we've already seen. More conversations sprouted like this as more of the hero course students tried to think of who the possible mystery teacher was. And Izuku was sweating. He hadn't seen All Might for the past 2 days. Now that didn't necessarily mean anything, but he hadn't seen him at orientation either. You'd think they'd want the #1 hero and symbol of peace to be there. It'd be a humongous announcement that the #1 hero was teaching at the #1 hero school, but he wasn't there. There was no announcement of it either, like it was purposefully being kept a secret. That couldn't be random, could it? What couldn't be random, Midoriya? Izuku blinked as he heard Yanaga's voice. He wanted to bonk himself on the head as he realized he had been muttering. Monoma was right about what he said about his muttering. He turned around and rubbed the back of his head. And nothing, Yanagi-chan, I was just thinking again. The girl tilted her head as she had a finger on her chin. If you are absolutely certain, Midoriya-kun. Izuku nodded as Kendo and Komori came to talk with the group. So Midoriya, how are you feeling after? Kendo trailed off as they all realized what she was referring to. The group sent worried glances at Izuku, but he smiled instead. I'm feeling really good actually. Recovery Girl's quirk is amazing. She patched me up perfectly. I didn't even feel a thing. Well, actually I did feel a little tired, but that's just because her quirks takes a person's energy to instantly heal them. He pulled out his book and was going to count off as much information as he could, but it was snatched by a dismembered floating hand. What's even up with this book anyway, Greenie? The arm came back to Takage. Izuku's eyes dilated as he closed and opened his hands, not feeling his book in them. Looking up very slowly, he saw it in Takage's hands. Give it back, he said in a low voice. Monoma flinched at how Izuku sounded silently pissed, and Yanaga's eyes widened as well. They both also noticed that he didn't stutter at all. Oh, come on, Greenie, I just want to know. Plus, we're green buddies, aren't we? Takage smiled as she began to flip through pages, not noticing Izuku's instant mood change. What is that? His diary. Man, what a loser. The boy blinked as he heard voices. I'm kind of curious too, Midoriya. Takage, let me see, Kendo said as she looked over her friend's shoulder, trying to peek at Midoriya's notes. Perhaps he had written more about her quirk. Have you heard of his book? Seriously? What a stalker. Takage, give Midoriya back his book. Komori muttered as she saw Midoriya clench his hands, clearly wanting his book back. Monoma and Yanagi stared as they heard Izuku start breathing rather raggedly, clenching and opening his mouth as air was pushed in and out of him. He heard more voices. They wouldn't stop. No damn book is gonna help you, Deku. You're useless. That's all you will ever be. Useless, worthless, quirkless. If you want a quirk so bad, take a swan dive off the roof and pray for one in your next life. Izuku grit his teeth as he remembered the day he met All Might. More importantly, Kaken's words to him when school ended. his book being burned to a crisp and being thrown away like trash. He never let anyone take his notebook away now. No one. Give it back. The class quieted as Izuku yelled. Yanagi and Monoma stared with wide eyes as Izuku stood and yanked his notebook back from a gaping Takage. He seemed stiff and partially regretting his yelling as he went back to his seat. The class was quiet and even Vlad King was a little wide-eyed at his spot at the front of the class. Oh shit, Midori is the quiet kid. You don't get the quiet kid mad. A boy with brown hair named Kosai Tsuburaba muttered. Though everyone was so quiet everyone heard it, eliciting a chuckle and snort from a couple of the students. Tetsu activated his quirk and folded in on himself to not burst out laughing. Before anyone could ask questions they heard a powerful voice from behind the closed door. I am coming through the door. The doorway slammed open, revealing All Might with his cape fluttering into the class like a hero. The class stared dumbfounded as the number one hero strode to the podium, Vlad scooting out of the way with a sigh. You have impeccable timing, All Might. The giant pro smiled as he put his hands on his hips. This is Hero Foundation's 101. And I'll be your teacher, he yelled elegantly, though he was confused by the lack of reaction from the students. It was just silence. The man began to sweat when the class didn't say anything, staying as quiet as dead. Well, really anything that was dead. Who? Oh, why fuck, it's All Might. The class all heard Oasis yell and soon everyone else was gushing over the fact that the number one hero would be teaching them. It's his Silver Age costume. Is he bigger than he is on TV? His hand is probably the size of my head. Izuku found himself smiling and sighing in delight. All Might's abrupt entrance had gotten him out of an embarrassing situation. But also, how could you not be at least a little bit happy when you were in the same room as the symbol of peace? He glanced down at his notebook and held it to his chest before looking back up and smiling at his hero. All Might found himself mentally laughing at how excited Izuku looked at his entrance. I've known the kid for a year now and he still gets excited every time he sees me like it's his first time doing so. Truly a fanboy. His smile stretched as he pulled a card and smacked it on top of the podium. Today I'll be having battle. Kamakiri smiled widely as he read the word in bright crimson letters on the blank white card. Training. Tetsu smiled as he activated his quirk and pumped an arm into the air. Izuku smiled to himself as All Might's signature smile widened. This was it, their first heroics exercise. We'll be meeting at ground beta for the exercise. But before that, you'll need to look the part. The pro gestured to the side of the room where cupboards opened up, displaying suitcases with their suit numbers on them, though one was missing. Midoriya, where's your case? Monoma asked as he noticed number 19 was missing. Izuku smiled. Don't worry, Monoma-kun. I have a costume. The blonde stared at him for a second before nodding. If you say so. Vlad stepped up to the podium as All Might moved aside, then cleared his throat before yelling, head to the changing rooms with your costumes and meet All Might at ground beta in 10 minutes. Do not be late. His yell vibrated through the students as Tetsu and Kamakiri jumped out of their seats and grabbed their cases before racing out of the class. Let go. Honi cheered in broken Japanese as she ran out of the class with her own case. Izuku watched as more and more of his classmates followed. All right. It was time, and he couldn't be more nervous and excited. Ground beta. Haha. They say the suit makes the man. And you all look absolutely wonderful. They all heard All Might's signature laugh as they exited the tunnel into ground beta. Vlad wasn't around, having business to attend to, but he would be back for the end of the exercise. It's just me today. I can handle this. The new teacher sweated as he knew he was alone. The class all cheered as they got into the light, looking over each other's costumes. You look dazzling, Yanagi. Monoma yelled as he looked at Yanagi's costume. A knee-length kimono that was a pale shade of purple that had sleeves that covered her hands. I must say, Monoma-kun, your choice of attire is strange, she replied. The boy smiled and played with his hair, posing in his suit. He wore a black suit with long sleeves with a white undershirt and 2 belts, one brown and one white, a teal tie and long coat tails. It is quite magnificent, is it not? Just straight weird, dude. How's a suit going to help in the field? Takage asked as she approached, wearing a skin-tight blue costume with black boots and black gloves with gold forearm bands, the suit seeming to have scales on it. Yanagi tilted her head. Your outfit is a little revealing, is it not? The green-haired girl smiled. Yeah, but I can use that against villains. They get embarrassed and flushed. Next thing they know they get punched by a floating hand to the face. She grinned. Whatever you say, Takage. Kendo muttered as she and Komori came up. Komori wearing a cute red and white mushroom-themed dress and Kendo wearing a turquoise sleeveless kippao with a black corset with a domino mask. But, where's Midoriya? As sorry everyone. All the students heard the cry from the tunnel and out came running Izuku. Midoriya. Oh man, first it was his scars then his quirk. Now he's doing the late entrance thing that main characters do. I want to see how cool his costume is. Tetsu found himself involuntarily activating his quirk again as he cheered. All Might himself was waiting in anticipation as the footsteps became louder and louder until the boy finally emerged from the tunnel. It was lackluster to say the least, but it was skin-tight, which showed off his impressive frame. Takagi even licked her lips. The hell is that abomination? Kamakiri yelled and the class sweat dropped. Now Kamakiri, someone at a company put a lot of work into making Izuku's costume. To dismiss their hard work is rude as a hero in training. Shishida interned. Actually. They all heard Izuku start talking and turned to him. My mom made it. And the laughing started. It wasn't the worst, honestly. He'd been through more humiliating things before. Awase held his sides as he laughed and Sen was already on the floor. Izuku winced, but it really wasn't that bad. It was moderate compared to what he was used to. All Might frowned as he watched the display. He knew that he shouldn't be playing favorites, but Midori Izuku was like I have no idea, but something special, that's for damn sure. The boy had found a way into his heart, and seeing him laughed at, it hurt. Inagi frowned as the laughs of more people got louder, Kosai finding himself joining, and as well as Kamakiri, Shishida remarking at how rude they were being. She walked past all the boys and found herself in front of Midoriya. I believe accepting a costume from your mother is very honorable. She must have been very proud when she heard you made it in and gave it to you as a gift. No. The masked face of Izuku blushed at Yanaga's outfit. It wasn't anything near the levels of whatever Takagi was wearing. Seriously, why is it skin tight? But Izuku found it cute. He rubbed the back of his neck at her words. Why yeah, she was really proud of me. And I couldn't just throw this away. But it'll probably get messed up today. The girl tilted her head and prodded at his costume. She didn't know he was so buff. Izuku blushing as he wasn't wearing anything underneath and it was skin tight. She stopped and looked at him before grabbing his hand and placing something in it. Izuku rose a brow as she let go of his hand, allowing him to see a bracelet. It was a black leather band with a green gem held in a silver container, specks of gold dotting the band. What's this, Yanagi-chan? The girl looked at him. It's a token of our friendship, Midoriya. I want you to know that whenever you are in a dire situation, you can always come to me and Monoma. Izuku gaped at the ghost girl and found himself tearing up. He instantly put the bracelet on and held the decorated arm to his chest. This is the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. Thank you. Inagi found herself smiling underneath her mask. There is no need to thank me. It is what friends are for, is it not? Izuku chuckled and rubbed the back of his neck. All right, I keep on forgetting. They all heard a throat clear as All Might drew the attention back to himself. If I may, we have a class to get to. The students scrambled up and prepared themselves mentally for their first assignment. The man smiled as all the students had looks of determination. All right, now All Might pulled a script out. Is he serious? We will be conducting urban battle demonstrations. A duo of villains have hidden a bomb in a 5-story building. It is the hero's job to reclaim the weapon before 10 minutes have expired or capture the villains in the allotted time. He smiled as he put the script away and saw his disappointed students. Is something the matter? Shishida exchanged glances with his fellow students who were shaking their heads in disappointment. And no sir, not at all. The pro held a thumbs up. I'm glad. Now, any questions? Shota threw a hand up and All Might told him to ask. How will teams be picked? All Might's smile stretched as he pulled out 2 boxes. One labeled teams and the other labeled as designations. We'll decide by drawing straws. That will determine your team and if you're playing a hero or a villain. To be forced to act in villainy, such a sinful act, Shizaki muttered. Shishida raised a hand. Sir, is it really wise to decide in such a haphazard manner? The Beast Boy asked. Actually, Shishida-kun, during incidents heroes don't tend to know who they're working with. They just have to work with whoever's on the scene. Izuku remembered the sludge incident. Those heroes weren't used to working with whoever was on the scene. Rather working by themselves. Their teamwork was terrible and thus someone almost died. He shook the thought away and brought himself back to what was happening. Ah, I see. Thank you, Midoriya. My apologies, All Might Sensei. The giant man waved a hand. Worry not, young Shishida. Now, any other questions? Kendo threw a hand up. I have one, Sensei. Give it a shot, young Kendo. The man laughed. It was weird seeing All Might so casually that she still almost couldn't believe it. Are we going to rate our performances and will we see each other's performances too? She asked. The man nodded. That was a great question. Yes, young Kendo. We will be picking a MVP for each match after they conclude through peer evaluation. Anything else, young heroes? No one spoke up, so the man nodded to himself and let everyone pick their lots. Izuku gulped when it was his turn. Seeing a smiling All Might hold the box towards him eased his worries a little and he clenched his eyes closed and grabbed a lot. He got letter A. He looked around. Does anyone else have an A? I do. The loud and excited form of Tetsu was standing in front of Izuku in less than a second, making the boy gulp. Tetsu was a little too hardcore for his taste. All right, I'm on a team with Midoriya. But he didn't seem to be a mean guy, so that was a plus. Everyone else grouped up. Monoma and Takagi were on a team, Komori was partnered up with someone called Kiwaro, Kendo was paired with Shishida, and Yanagi was with Bondo. Izuku thought about how their groups could work together. Monoma and Takage could use Takage's quirk to confuse the enemy, or maybe Monoma could use his opponent's quirks against them in conjunction with Takage's quirk. How many can he copy at a given time? Questions for later. If Komori could make black or dark mushrooms, then they could have Kiwaro hide in them in a labyrinth of the fungi. Kendo and Shishida were a full brawl pairing. They'd need to go all out and win that way. With Yanagi and Bondo, that was interesting. Bondo could make traps of glue and Yanagi could use her quirk to tug their opponents into them. Or she could have Bondo produce glue and she could use it as projectiles. Or, if they were villains, they could just cover the bomb in glue so the heroes weren't able to touch it. That's actually a really good idea. Yo, Earth to Midoriya. The boy squirmed at the loud yell and turned to his partner. We got our match, dude. Izuku turned to All Might, seeing him display two balls, one black and the other white with letters on them. On the white ball a letter A was displayed. On the black one a letter E was displayed. Whose team A? Tetsu looked around, trying to find their opponents. Izuku was sweating. He had been paying attention to team formations, not matchups, so he knew who team E was. Kamakiri-kun. He wasn't excited about this. His partner was Tsunotori, which they could use to their advantage. They might have communication problems, but they both had really strong quirks. Tetsu could counter Kamakiri's quirk, and maybe Tsunotori's, but he doubted there would be an occasion for Tetsu to take both out. Not if they worked well together. But Kamakiri showed little signs of cooperativeness. Izuku took a chance to glance at the bug-looking boy to see his grin, one that reminded him too much of Kaken. He gulped. So, you got a plan, Midoriya? Tetsu asked as they arrived outside of the building. They had a 5-minute planning phase and 10 minutes to capture the bomb. The building was 5 stories tall. The greenette presumed that they'd probably place it on the top floor. Tsunotori seemed normal but excited, and Kamakiri seemed battle-hungry. Kamakiri-kun will probably leave the bomb to come for us. Tsunotori-sen may or may not follow. He spoke aloud, Tetsu nodding along. Suo, what does that mean? The boy smiled. Izuku adopted a thinking look, pulling out his notebook. We should stay together. That way if Tsunotori-sen goes with Kamakiri-kun, then we have a chance to counter. If Kamakiri comes alone, then I'm going to rely on you. Your quirk counters his. He wrote down their plan and tore out the pages and handed them to Tetsu, who stuffed them into his shorts. Anything else? Tetsu asked. Honestly, Midoriya was super smart. That was obvious to see. And it was really cool too. He wanted Midoriya to see if there was anything he could learn about his quirk too. Izuku scrunched his brow as he nodded. If we can't resolve it quickly, then in just a few blows, I'll deal with Kamakiri and you can go get the bomb. You might be able to run through Tsunotori's horns, so go straight for the bomb. Might. I don't like how that sounds, man. Tetsu yelled. Well, I don't know how strong her horns are, or how strong your metal skin is. Is it actually steel like the name of your quirk? Or is it something else entirely? What's its melting point? Does it rust? How much force can it take? That's the type of questions I need answers to. Izuku sighed as he pulled his hood up, throwing his mask over it, the smile glimmering as he stared into the dark entrance of the building. I don't have any answers right now. So, this is the best we have. Tetsu shook with excitement. I'll totally tell you then. Its melting point is I don't know. Izuku sighed. It's fine, Tetsu-kun. You can just call me Tetsu. My name's kinda a mouthful. The steel teen interrupted. Izuku blushed but nodded. He had never called anyone by a nickname before. That's something friends did, right? Were he and Tetsu just Tetsu friends? He didn't know. Oh, okay. But it's fine. Really? We can figure that out after if you want. Totally. Mind giving me some pointers for my quirk too? Sorry, but you're super smart and I wanna be as manly as you, Midoriya. The boy exclaimed. Izuku turned to him and his blush was visible under the mask. I am not manly at all. Why, you got it all wrong, Tetsu-kun. The boy waved a hand. Nah man, your quirk is totally metal. It breaks you but you still use it like it's nothing. And your scars are awesome, the boy exclaimed, invading Izuku's space just a bit with his excitement. Izuku gulped and nodded. Oh okay, I can help. Thanks man. Tetsu got situated afterwards, waiting for the countdown alongside Izuku. Izuku closed his eyes and activated One for All, putting 2% of the quirk into his legs. He opened them and they glowed a radioactive green. Tetsu activated his quirk and pumped an arm into the air. Do or die time. Strategizing time is up. Heroes, move in. Kamakiri smirked as he ran out of the room where they had set the bomb in. Defend the bomb, horny, he yelled as he made his dash around the halls. Tsunotori huffed. She had understood half of what the boy had meant, but she didn't like being left behind. She crossed her arms and pouted. Well, that's just mean, leaving me behind like that. She'd show him. The American smiled as she dashed out of the room. She'd capture both of the heroes and then laugh in ma kai rai. Kamakiri's face. Izuku and Tetsu ran through the halls. As they continued through the halls, Kamakiri cackled as he went straight to the first floor. Tsunotori grumbled while she searched the top floor, seeing if the heroes had found a way up quickly. 4th floor next. She muttered in broken Japanese before heading down to the next floor. Tetsu and Izuku ran up to the next floor, not bothering to check. Izuku knew for a fact that Kamakiri would be loud and make a lot of noise. He was like Bakugo, but he hadn't displayed the battle instincts the boy. Izuku had watched the blonde for years. He knew what he was capable of. Kamakiri showed none of those abilities, besides the same level of rage. So the fact that they didn't hear his footsteps meant that he was on a higher floor. They entered the 3rd floor and were approaching the stairwell when Izuku saw a glint of silver in the darkness of a passing hallway. The form jumped out and he saw a smiling Kamakiri. Get down. Tetsu grabbed Izuku and threw him to the floor, Kamakiri slashing him across the chest and doing nothing. Tetsu grinned as the bug-looking boy recoiled and backed up, a grimace on his face. Izuku looked back as he stood up, seeing Tetsu standing like a guardian. 1 for all. 2%. Izuku charged up All Might's power into his fist and charged at Kamakiri. SMASSSHH. Izuku's yell cut through the building as he launched his fist at Kamakiri, the boy blocking using his forearm blade as a shield, the force launching him into a wall. He smiled. They could go get Tsunotori now. I quote, "I'm not done." They both heard him yell. Izuku gulped. Having Kamakiri tailing them would alert Tsunotori to their location, which wasn't good. He nodded to himself. Tetsu-kun, go for the bomb. Izuku yelled. Are you sure? Yes. Izuku nodded as he massaged his wrist. He powered it up too fast, didn't get a good feel for the amount. It may have been 3 or 4, it hurts. All right. Good luck, bro. He heard Tetsu yell before the boy ran off. Izuku nodded as Kamakiri stood back up, a scowl on his face. Okay. He doesn't like me. Wonder what I did. Izuku dodged under a horizontal slash that was sent his way, before taking a jump back to gain distance. Kamakiri closed the gap with a leap and sent another slash Izuku's way. The boy dodged. 2% smash. He quickly retaliated, sending Kamakiri skittering back again. I can't get in good hits and I can barely dodge. I'm fighting a losing battle. He needed strategies, an idea, more ideas than just punch and evade. I can't cut through concrete or brick. I've tried. It makes my blades dull. Izuku's eyes lit up as he ran down the hall. Don't run, stutter. Izuku heard a yell as he ducked around a corner, quickly turning around. 1 for all, 4%. He charged up his power and saw Kamakiri come around the corner. They got into each other's personal space, Kamakiri bringing his right arm up to strike Izuku, his left arm moving as well. Izuku dodged the first but got nicked by the second in his side, though he persevered and punched the boy's right arm, redirecting it and sending it crashing into the wall. The blade scratching against the wall roughly, sparks being seen. Kamakiri winced as he felt the familiar feeling of his blade dulling. Izuku ignored his own familiar feeling of blood escaping his body from the cut in his side as he stepped forward, using his left hand as his right hand throbbed in pain. 2% smash. He punched the boy in the stomach and the boy rolled away. Damn it. Kamakiri got up and glared at Izuku. I'll kick your ass, stutter. Hey you Midoriya, I got a problem. Izuku heard Tetsu's voice through a comm link they were given. He pressed the comm link. What is it, Tetsu-kun? She's not at the bomb. She's on level 4 and she's strong OOF. The line went dead and Izuku waited a couple of seconds. He didn't hear any announcement on Tetsu being eliminated, so he concluded the boy was still up and kicking. And Kamakiri was the same. He slashed Izuku across the chest, the boy's costume easily tearing at the blade, even if it was dull. He winced. I knew it'd be too thin. He yelled at himself as he dodged a vertical slice from Kamakiri. He dodged a barrage of slashes from Kamakiri, gritting his teeth and ignoring the pain that he was feeling. Give up, stutter. Kamakiri yelled as he sent a strike to Izuku's face, the successor ducking and wrapping his capture tape around the boy's arm, pulling the tape and forcing Kamakiri to stumble. I won't, he yelled, angry that he had stuttered. He let go of his capture tape and punched the boy again, this time in the cheek and making him wince. This was plus ultra. Give up. Viewing room. All Might flinched as Izuku took strikes from his classmate. He wanted to stop the match, to protect his successor, but he couldn't play favorites. Damn it. He clenched a fist to stop himself from doing too much, but he did loathe this feeling of helplessness. Inagi frowned. Midoriya was taking a lot of damage. It was superficial cuts, but they would eventually add up. He's acting so rash. She spoke aloud. Takage, who was standing next to her, smiled. You worried about Greenie, huh? Takage asked coyly to the ghost girl as she leaned towards her. The girl squinted her eyes, trying to get as much detail from the screens as she could. Yes. Yanagi kept her eyes focused on the screen. It was strange. He was always so nervous, so scared. But he looked so ferocious right now. He was cunning and calculating. He led Kamakiri to around a corner and used that second where he wasn't seen to charge up for an attack. Not only that, but he was trying to dull the boy's blades. But I also trust him to be okay. Takage pouted. That wasn't what she was looking for. Alright, what about you, Blondie? Monoma huffed. He had a name. I believe Midoriya can handle himself, though I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried. He fixed his sleeve cuff as he stared at the screen. Izuku punching the boy away after ducking. Monoma wanted to kick Kamakiri's ass real bad right now. Komori quivered. Seeing Midoriya get injured, it made her scared. Komori, are you alright? Her partner, Kiwaro, asked. She squeaked, not used to being talkative with her new classmates yet. I am fine. Just nervous is all. She lowered her head to hide her eyes behind her bangs. Kiwaro smiled. His smile was kind of strange to her. It wasn't like Izuku's. Kiwaro's was kinda creepy, but it was still nice in its own way. She found it reassuring. It'll be fine. Just rely on me and no darkness will take you, alright. She was confused by his speech but nodded. Oh okay, Shroom. Kamakiri squinted his eyes, as if he was staring at something brighter than the sun before turning away. Komori blinked at his strange behavior. Kendo felt agitated as she watched Izuku redirect more of Kamakiri's slices into the surrounding walls, trying to dull his blades. She wanted to give the bug-looking boy a piece of her mind. She switched her gaze to another one of the cameras, seeing Tetsu hiding behind a pillar as horns rained down on him. She sighed. Tetsu-kun. The boy squirmed as he tried to look out from his pillar, a flying horn zooming and hitting the rock he was hiding behind and almost his face as well, making him hide behind the pillar again. Midoriya. Her horns fly hard and fast, dude. He yelled into his comm. His comm turned on and he heard the sound of something hitting the ground. T tried to get into her personal space and grab her horns. I think that might stop her from using her quirk. I'll try to finish as soon as I am gonna kick your ass. The comm died and Tetsu gritted his teeth. Her horn had hit him fast, cracking his metal. Though her horn had also taken extreme damage, almost breaking on impact, which was good for him. It almost made him celebrate, but she regrew new horns almost instantly. Her power was replenishable. His was finite to the amount of iron he ate. Alright, grab her horns. Plain and simple. He psyched himself up as he bounced in place. He yelled out a battle cry and started his assault. Izuku cried out as he got assaulted by a barrage of blades. He backed into a corner and ducked, Kamakiri's blades striking the concrete wall behind Izuku, dulling even more as sparks flew off and lit up the dark hall. The greenette charged and punched the boy away with a punch to the stomach. He didn't use his quirk, not having nearly enough time to charge it up. I can't risk staying in his personal space too long, Izuku thought. Kamakiri could create blades anywhere. It'd be too risky to stay close for prolonged periods of time. But he couldn't just keep playing cat and mouse either. I have to take him out of the match. The problem was his capture tape had long since been torn to shreds by the bug boy after Izuku had discarded it, so he'd have to use brute force. He'd have to push one for all to a percentage he couldn't handle. Even if it would break him, it was the best bet he had. But he'd have to gauge it, so as to not hurt Kamakiri too badly as well. He winced. Getting caught up in his thoughts gave his opponent a chance to strike his side, a deep cut now residing there. You're slowing down, Kamakiri yelled. Too many cuts, too much damage. He needed to end this. He ducked under another slice from Kamakiri and ran under the boy's arm. Getting partially behind him, he tripped the boy's foot, his opponent now falling forwards into the ground. He turned around and charged his fist. One for all, 15%. He felt his bones crack from the force as the power tore his glove to shreds. Thankfully, this hand didn't have his friendship bracelet. He ignored the pain. He'd be paying Recovery Girl a visit later and she would not be happy about it. Smash, he yelled, caving in Kamakiri's back with his fist. The other boy coughing out spit as the force met him. Izuku huffed out a breath as he backed away. Kamakiri didn't make any movements of getting back up. He wanted to cheer, but the pain of his arm snapped him back to reality. His arm throbbed. His bones were most likely broken, but they weren't pulverized. Still though, he held it as he wanted to cry. He took deep breaths. He was getting slightly dizzy from the pain. The class in the viewing deck watched with worry. All Might Sensei, you should pull him out, Kendo yelled. She, and most of her classmates, realized Izuku had gone straight past his limits and was most likely needing medical attention right now. They had seen a spark of green lightning come from his bare arm when he pushed his quirk. Now seeing him grip it in obvious discomfort, he needed to stop. All Might nodded, grabbing his microphone. Izuku's calm coming to life in the room so everyone could hear what he would say. Young Midoriya, you have been eliminated. Tetsu-kun. What floor are you on? His yell came into the room. All Might gripped his microphone, losing his voice in his throat. He wanted Izuku to win, to keep on going until he succeeded. But he knew that the boy was in a major amount of pain now. But the boy's voice held conviction, and yet it held pain as well. They weren't able to hear what Tetsu said, but they saw him on the camera, yelling into his comm as he tried to get Tsunotori's horns, the girl dodging out of the way pretty easily however. Why your increased weight when you use her metal form makes you slower, it makes it easier for her to dodge. I think she has increased leg strength because of an added bonus of her quirk. They heard him yell as he ran up the stairs. All Might still having trouble opening his mouth. Monoma was tapping his foot. He wanted his friend to succeed and Midoriya was showing much resilience and aptitude in on-the-go planning. But there would be a point where he would crash and burn. Midoriya, as sensei, please stop the exercise and administer Midoriya to Recovery Girl's office. Shishida spoke his mind, All Might turning to him and eventually nodding. He gulped. I'm sorry, young Midoriya. He thought regretfully. Young Midoriya, you have been. Stop running, stutter. The yell came through Midoriya's comm and the class watched as he was being chased by Kamakiri through the halls. Are you serious? That guy's resilient, Sen yelled in surprise. The class had to agree. Dude, how hard is his hate boner from Midoriya? Awase asked aloud. All Might heard snorts and he had to sigh. He had to remember that these heroes in training were still kids. He turned off the microphone. All Might sensei, you're going to let Midoriya keep on going. Kendo was nettled. The green-haired boy had to stop at some point. The pro nodded. Yes, young Kendo. Why? He has to stow. Monoma laid a hand on the redhead's shoulder, the girl turning to him with a glare. He had to hide his shiver. Kendo, even if All Might were to tell Midoriya to stop, do you believe he would? The question threw her for a loop. She didn't know Midoriya that well, none of them knew him too well. So far the boy was kind of a mystery. The only thing being known is that he had a stutter and was good at breaking down quirks. But, if she had to guess, no. Monoma nodded. You see, Midoriya's quirk damages him, and I believe that the first time he used it without breaking himself was during our quirk test. He was going to take a beating from that Bakugo fellow for us. He told us to not get involved, despite us going out of our way to help. He follows his own rules, Kendo. Even if All Might Sensei were to tell him to stop, he wouldn't. Monoma smiled a bit as he saw Kendo deflate, and hearing most of the class go silent. Midoriya was strange to most of them. His quirk had a glass cannon nature, and he could barely use it. He had a stutter and showed signs of anxiety. That guy in the cafeteria attacked him for no reason. But right now, he looked to be in the zone. Tetsu-kun, switch with me. He yelled into his comm as he arrived on the 4th floor. All right, tell me when you get up, was what he got as a reply. Kamakiri was still hot on his trail, the screams of profanities alerting him to so. He ran around a corner and saw both Tsunotori and Tetsu. Switch, he yelled. Tetsu turned to him and nodded, activating his quirk and running to Izuku. Passing him, the silver-haired boy grinned. Izuku activated One for All in his legs at 2%, giving him more mobility while Tetsu activated his own quirk, metal skin bursting to life. Tsunotori turned to him and he saw her smirk as her horns launched off of her head, coming straight towards him. He strafed to the right, barely dodging. He smiled as he was getting closer, but then he saw her smirk grow wider. Gotcha, she yelled in English and Izuku felt something impact his back. Crap, think. He was flying towards the blonde American. She had redirected her horn and was using it to bring Izuku towards her. He could use that to his advantage. He readied a leg. His fists took too much damage from earlier and he knew he couldn't use them. He charged 3% into each of his legs before hitting Tsunotori with them. The girl let out a gasp as he collided with her stomach. He rolled onto the ground afterwards. She can telekinetically control her horns after firing them. He noted that as he got up. Tsunotori was still getting up and Tetsu was dealing with Kamakiri, so he could go for the bomb. Tetsu turned to him and realized it as well. Go for it, bro, he yelled, before taking a blade to his side. It slid off his skin as it couldn't pierce and Tetsu sucker punched Kamakiri in the stomach. Izuku nodded, turning around and making it for the next floor. He heard the sound of Tsunotori huffing and charged One for All into his legs. They were in pain though, so he kept it at 2%. 2 horns flew past him before turning around and coming for him. He ducked. He found the staircase and jumped up them, wincing as he upped the percentage to 3. Keep on going. He yelled at himself as he arrived at the 5th floor. No, run. He heard Tsunotori yell but he ignored it, bouncing around the halls as he looked for the bomb. He blasted into a room and smiled as he saw the paper mache structure. And then he felt objects cup around his armpits and he was floating towards the far wall. How much weight can her horns hold? He thought as he realized Tsunotori was using her horns to pin him against a wall. He smashed against the structure with a thud, wincing as the horns locked him in place high up on it. He opened his eyes and saw Tsunotori a couple feet below him smiling. His vision was going dark as well. He coughed, his breath clouding his smiling mask. Maybe a combination of blood and oxygen loss, he thought passively as he charged One for All into his legs again and placed them against the wall. He pushed off and quickly came down on her, grabbing her horns, his hands throbbing in pain. She yelled and tried to shake him off but he held on. Tetsu-kun, I need you in here. He yelled with as much strength as he could, which wasn't much. He heard scrambling and yelling before Tetsu came in from the doorway. Go get the bomb. He smiled. All right, he yelled as he activated his quirk. Kamakiri came into the room, but Tetsu quickly turned around and decked him. Kamakiri's quirk doing nothing to protect him from the force of the punch as he fell to the floor. The metal boy ran for the bomb, and Tsunotori could only struggle in vain to get out of Izuku's grip as Tetsu reached the device and touched it. Hero team wins. A robotic voice was heard and the students collapsed. Tetsu fell against the fake bomb and sighed in relief and victory. Turning around, he was going to congratulate Midoriya to find him passed out, being held by Tsunotori. Bro, he ran over. Tsunotori looked distressed as she held the passed out boy. They could clearly see blood covering some of him, many tears in his costume. His hood was gone as well, torn to shreds by Kamakiri's blades. His hand looked wrecked, though nothing near as bad as what a waste described the other day. Fuck, he heard her mutter in English. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it must have been bad. Fuck, he yelled as he took Midoriya from her arms, holding him over his shoulder as he ran through the halls to get him to someplace that could help. And then he ran into a pair of robots. Hand him over, and he felt like he was being mugged. He gave the bots the unconscious boy. They placed him on a stretcher, and they left, the whirring of their wheels getting quieter as they got away. As students, please make your way back here. They heard All Might over their comm links. Tetsu had gone and woken up Kamakiri. The boy had passed out after he took a sucker punch to the face before Tetsu had to go get the bomb. He did not seem happy in the slightest. He was a pure conglomerate of anger and rage, screaming purely profanities as the three of them walked back to the viewing deck. Tetsu sighed. I hope Midori is all right. Recovery Girl's office. Recovery Girl had been having a good day so far. No students had come in at all, which was always a really good thing. But she had also been on edge throughout the entire day. It's never this good, she muttered. She kept on whipping her head around to the door to see if it would thrust open and she would have to deal with a disaster. Nothing had happened. She sighed as she pulled out her phone. Maybe she could call Gran and tell her that Toshinori had picked someone. Maybe he could help train the boy, because she did not want to deal with him breaking himself anymore. He had a situation. She sighed as she heard the familiar robotic voice of her medbot say behind her. She had forgotten today were the first heroic exercises for the first years. Of course, there would be a couple of students that were ruffled up. She sighed as she turned around, grabbing some gummies to give the student afterwards. And her eyes landed on a familiar tuft of green hair. For Christ's sake. The class was dead quiet when Tetsu, Tsunotori, and Kamakiri had entered. The air held a weight in it and Tetsu felt it in his stomach and his throat. He felt like he couldn't breathe. His eyes went across his classmates, more so the people he knew Midoriya was friends with, and he saw all their reactions, all of their anger, all of their sadness. Monoma had his arms crossed and was tapping his foot. He had a scowl on his face, his eyes every now and then drifting towards Kamakiri in a glare. The bug boy crossing his arms and scoffing when he caught the blonde's gaze. Inagi was frowning, wringing her wrists. Why was she doing that? He had no idea. But Tetsu had never seen the girl frown before. She had always looked impassive. Seeing a negative emotion on her face was concerning. It wasn't that hard to know that she was also at least a little angry with Kamakiri. Everyone else was one of the two, either angry at Kamakiri or sad with the events and Midoriya's current situation. Though the Steel teen noticed that Kendo looked like she was fuming, albeit silently, or as silently as she could. Allow us to move on. Young Monoma and Takage as the villains against young Shizaki and Kodai as the heroes. All Might interrupted, his voice and words doing nothing to alleviate the mood. The duo that knew Midoriya left, both having tension in their shoulders as they walked out the door, the stoic-faced duo of Shizaki and Kodai leaving soon after as well. Tetsu looked around the room. He was squirming. He felt terrible right now. He needed to voice out his thoughts. He saw Yanagi, but the girl was terribly quiet in class and she spoke with a voice of something. He couldn't figure out what exactly. But there was a flare of something in her voice that kinda made him feel dumb. He looked around more and his eyes landed on Kendo. She was friends with Midoriya, right? Maybe he could talk to her about it. She definitely seemed approachable and she was pretty manly also. He walked to her and stood next to her as she was watching the screens. She glanced at him. Is there something you need? She asked with a raised brow. Tetsu took a look at her as well and he nodded. Yeah, you're friends with Midoriya, right? I think so, but I'm not as close as Monoma and Yanagi are. She responded. Why? Did you need something? No? Well, yeah. But Tetsu tripped over his words as he thought of what he wanted to say. Midoriya's kinda hardcore, but too hardcore, you know. He exclaimed as if it made sense. This was going to be a long conversation. Takage sighed as she lifted the bomb to the roof. All Might didn't say the area was off limits, so they figured it was fair game. She used her quirk and was surprised that the bomb was surprisingly light. They set up on the roof and Monoma sat on an edge facing the back of the building so the heroes wouldn't see him. He looked like he was thinking. Going by his creased brow, he clicked his tongue and made a tisk noise as he stood up. All right, I believe it would be best to split the two of them up. How we go about that? I'm not sure. Takage put her hands behind her head as she hummed. Her brain train went choo-choo and after a couple seconds she smiled. Blonde, I got an idea. The boy huffed. I have a name, Talkage. Yeah, whatever, I got a plan. Now are you in or not? She let out a hand as her smirk grew. The blonde boy sighed as he shook it. Very well, I do want to win, so tell me, what idea has your genius blessed us with? His smirk matched Takage's as they decided to rain hell and confusion on their opponents. Kodai and Shizaki entered the building after the planning phase had ended. It was different from the first round, but they both assumed that the bomb would be on the 5th floor just like the last round. All right, stick together, little lamb, and allow my holy light to guide you to victory, Shizaki said, her hands together for a prayer. Her partner merely nodded. She was a little nettled but let the jab slide for now. They walked into the first connected hall and heard laughing. 2 different voices, one male, one female, cackled and giggled, one going both ways, left and right, from their intersecting halls. Shizaki sighed, such a sinful tactic. Her gaudy hair grew in size and went both ways, traveling throughout the building as it searched for her opponent. She sent it after the laughs, but she didn't hit anything. Her eyes narrowed as she searched the locations. She didn't find anything. Kodai, it's time to search for some black sheep. Their confusing tactic was sinful. Monoma and Takage laughed as they floated their mouths and one eye around the building, getting Shizaki to follow the body parts before they hid them away, making them invisible and making the religious girl angry. Their bodies were still on the roof and their bodies still had one eye in them. Takage's body was flailing on the floor, while Monoma was standing and disconnected his arm. Time for me to strike. The boy sent his hand out, ready to gain a couple of quirks to use. Kodai had reached the 3rd floor. They had already wasted half of their time following Monoma and Takage around. It was getting old. She remained impassive, however, as she jogged through the halls. Long since had she left her partner behind. She decided to climb the floors instead of looking for their opponents. They were either trying to distract them or Shizaki was bad at using her quirk. Either or she didn't really care. She got to the 4th floor and found nothing. 5th floor, she muttered under her breath. Shizaki was getting frustrated. She couldn't find the little lambs that were causing her ire. And then she felt a tap on her arm. Turning, she saw a floating hand. Before it zipped away from her, her eyes widened as she followed the limb, her vines crawling like a spider as the limb floated down many halls. So many times her vines barely missed catching it. She finally thought she had it when it found its way into a corner, only to see it go out a window. She pressed her calm, Kodai, I believe. Ah, hello Shizaki. Kodai isn't here right now. Actually, in just a second. Young Kodai has been eliminated. There it is. Monoma cackled. Good luck, Shizaki-san. She turned off her calm and huffed. She spent the rest of her time searching endlessly. Every floor, every room, every nook and cranny, but found nothing. The time ended and she felt like she was going to blow a gasket, and heard laughing from above her. She was on the 5th floor. How sinful, she muttered. Recovery girl's office. Izuku cried as the youthful heroine bonked him with her cane. I asked for a week, a single week, and you couldn't even do that. She had already healed him, as much as she could do for the day. But now that meant she had free rein to tell him how reckless and stupid he was, which was fair. But we had a heroics exercise. He lost his voice as the old hero glared at him. He decided not to open his mouth anymore. Recovery girl huffed. That's no excuse, you buffoon. Push yourself past your limit and your body won't be able to keep up. You're lucky your hand wasn't too broken. The nurse sighed as she gave him some gummies. You don't go plus ultra on your body with that quirk. You have to get used to it, sonny. Izuku quieted as he chewed on the given gummies. He knew he didn't have good control, but he couldn't just not participate in class. He clenched a fist. But All Might was able to use 100% from the start. Recovery girl turned to him and sighed. Toshinori trained for a long time to inherit that quirk. And he had 2 teachers, you only had 1. And on top of that, I doubt he was a good one. She sighed again, just thinking about how much of a terrible teacher Toshinori must be. It made her remember her age. She looked at Izuku, who looked as if he was contemplating something. I need to get better. She barely made out. His brow was creased and it looked as if he was shaking slightly. It's too much pressure. Damn it, Toshinori, you've put too much on his shoulders. He's just a child, for God's sake. Recovery girl instantly knew that was it. Having to carry the legacy of the symbol of peace. Having to carry on the torch of one for all, on top of whatever else was going on in his life. She was surprised the boy didn't have any white hairs. She went to her desk and tore out a piece of paper, quickly writing a number on it. Either he'll make it a lot worse or a lot better. There's no in between with him. She sighed and approached the bed that the successor occupied. If I finish my homework during lunch and in between classes, maybe also during homeroom, I can get in a lot of hours to workout time. But I'll have to get used to it or just push through. That's about 7 hours of workout time a day. 8 hours of sleeps, an hour for everything else, 8 hours for school. Yeah, this could worry Yao. Izuku yelped as a cane hit his head. Good, I got your attention. Izuku rubbed his head in discomfort. See, that hurt. It reminded him too much of his old teachers. Recovery girl looked at him and huffed. Well, how else am I going to get it into your thick skull that you need to stop breaking yourself? Anyways, I'm not here to argue, so take this. She handed him the piece of paper. Izuku rose a brow but took it. What's this? Someone who can help you, who can actually teach you. Just focus on what you can do for now. No crazy workout plans or anything of the such. Just call or text this number when you have the time and when you aren't in the process of healing after one of your stunts. She sighed and walked away. You can go back to class. Just come back tomorrow to finish your treatment. Izuku nodded and pocketed the paper. He stumbled out of bed and thanked her again after getting into a gym uniform. His arm was wrapped in a cast, but it was more of a lot of bandages than a full cast. The limb hurt, but not overly so like during the entrance exam. So that was a plus. He left, thinking about the number. Could the person that used this number help him? And if so, how? He shook his head and made his way to the viewing deck of Ground Beta. He remembered the route and hoped that he would be able to see at least a few of the matches. Izuku walked through the halls and was about to leave the main building. Midoriya. He knew that gruff and rough voice anywhere. He turned around and his eyes landed on his homeroom teacher, Vlad King. Ah, Kan-sensei. He bowed quickly. He stood back up. Nad realized something. He had no idea how to make conversation with someone older than him, so he opened his mouth before his brain started working. How's your day been? The man sighed. It sounded like he was tired, or maybe angry. Izuku couldn't put a finger on it. Interesting to say the least. Midoriya. It had definitely been interesting. That was for sure. The first thing that happened after he left the All Might to deal with the students was head to Nezu's office as he was called up to do so. And he learned more of Midoriya's unique situation. Yes, there's evidence that his middle school wasn't the best, and I still do not believe it has improved at all. They discriminated against Midoriya, all because of his quirklessness. I need you to assist Midoriya in getting up to speed with everyone else, Kan. He had been given a job, and he would do his best to fulfill it, just like he knew Nezu was going to do his best to tear Aldera to the ground. Honestly, all that he had learned was infuriating. He had never seen such things that angered him so much through such shitty cameras. But I wanted to talk to you about something, Midoriya, if you don't mind me taking too much of your time. He wasn't yelling, which he figured was good when talking to the boy. He flinched when too much noise happened. He had noticed that whenever Tetsu yelled, that would happen. Izuku waved his hands, and no, it's all right, Kan-sensei. I don't mind at all, he answered hastily. The giant man nodded and motioned Izuku to follow him. Come, let's walk. The class will be done by the time our conversation is over, so we can just head to the cafeteria now. Izuku nodded and started walking next to his teacher, wondering how much time he had taken up in the infirmary. The hall was quiet as Vlad King thought about what to say. He wanted to be blunt, but being too blunt had a chance of hurting Midoriya's feelings. It was clear his self-esteem was low. Taking a blow to it would be bad. So, Midoriya, tell me, are you training to use your quirk? Vlad King hoped that was an appropriate question. Izuku paused. He hadn't really had the time to do so. He had been working out but not using his quirk. And no sir, I haven't been able to, he answered. Vlad King easily noted the disappointment in his voice as he answered. At UA we don't have traditional extracurricular activities. We have social activities to help students get away from the stress of their classes, but there's also others to help assist those falling behind. He noticed how Izuku looked disappointed when he mentioned falling behind. Midoriya, I read your file and I know you're a late bloomer, on top of what you told the class during the quirk showcase. It's clear that you are behind everyone else. It might have been a little too blunt. Izuku clenched a fist. I know, sensei, he answered in a sad tone. Okay, definitely too blunt, damn it. Vlad chastised himself. He probably hurt the kid's feeling, though indirectly. Well, he wasn't a talkative guy. He didn't talk to people. He wasn't like Mike or Midnight. He was more like Aizawa, so he was struggling talking to the kid. Struggling being an understatement. Don't feel too bad. It's a given because of your situation. Izuku nodded. I know. He sounded a little annoyed. Perhaps because he wasn't making progress with his quirk, or maybe something else. So you want me to take an extracurricular activity to help me catch up? He asked as he put the pieces together. Vlad made a so-so motion with his hand, sort of. In reality, kid, I'm just going to be doing my best to help you catch up with the class and it'll be listed as extracurricular. But this isn't mandatory, so I came to ask you if it'd be something you want. Izuku kinda wanted to cry. Is this what teachers were supposed to be like? Were they supposed to help you when you struggled? He looked at Vlad King. His vision was blurry. Dang it. Stupid tears. And nodded. Why yes, I'd like that. Vlad King smiled as he stopped walking and let out a hand for his student to shake. All right, every day after school, I'll be located in training gym Gamma. Izuku shook his hand and noticed the difference in size. Vlad King was no All Might, but he was still huge. All right, sensei, I'll do my best, I promise. Izuku swore. His teacher grinned. That's all I ask, Midoriya. Now go get some lunch. You'll need energy for later today. He began to walk off. Izuku froze. Wait. We're starting today. The greenette ate his food quietly. When he had sat down, his class had entered the cafeteria, just finished with the exercise. He watched as they all wandered about, and Monoma caught a glance of him and sat down next to him as soon as he got his food. The rest of the group joined after that, though Tetsu was also sitting with them and Kiwara was too, though Kiwara was only talking to Komori. Wonder why that is. So far, nothing really interesting had happened, just asking how everyone's day was going, which was a weird question considering they all knew how each other's days had gone. The only ones who were acting normal were Kiwara, who Izuku guessed didn't care, and Komori because she was always nervous. So he decided to spark up a conversation with his totally existent social skills. Okay, I don't know anything about anyone really. This was going to be tough, wasn't it? Despite having friends now, he knew nothing about them. Was that how having friends worked? He didn't think so. The group turned to him as he started talking. How were your guys' matches? No one really reacted. They were all still kind of nervous, until Takage smiled and detached her upper body. It floated over the table, slinging her arm around Monoma, and also kind of bringing his head into her breast. We kicked ass, didn't we, Blondie? Monoma pushed her face, trying to get her off of himself. Yes, I suppose we did. Now please unhand me. Oh, come on, a lot of guys would love for this to happen to them. Well, I am not one of them, the boy yelled back. Takage huffed and sat back down, reconnecting to her lower half. Fine, be a party pooper then, she grumbled. Monoma straightened out his clothing and sighed. Izuku looked between the two of them, how was everyone else's? He was completely appalled at the fact that he was the one initiating the conversation. With so many people too. At Aldera, he never could have imagined talking to no even one person. But here he had a whole group of people he could talk to, and it was nerve-wracking. Komori blushed before entering the conversation. Kiwara-kun and I did well, shroom. We won our match, said Teen, simply nodded along with Komori. None of them knew exactly why he was here, but they weren't going to kick him out. Izuku turned to Yanagi, the girl sitting next to him as well. What about you, Yanagi-chan? The entire group, excluding Izuku, had seen that the girl had been frowning since the moment Izuku first entered battle with Kamakiri. But now, she had a really small smile on her face. She put a finger on her chin. My teammate and I conquered our opponents, though they were zealous in their desire to achieve victory. Despite that, we came out victorious in the end, she said. Izuku nodded. He wanted to ask how they won but decided not to. He knew he'd get into a mumble fit and that creeped people out. What about UK? Midolya? They all heard the yell of Izuku's last name, although it sounded a little scuffed. The group turned to see Pony approaching their table, smiling. It was heart-melting. And now Izuku knew how much looks could be deceiving. Tetsu-kun struggled fighting her. I only won because grabbing her horns is a weakness that I just guessed on. And now here she was, making them all scrunch their eyes at her brightness and cuteness. She turned to Izuku. You okay? She said with an accent. It was clear that she meant to say, are you okay? But none of them would fault her. Japanese was a difficult language to learn, and being a hero course student gave her a lot of duties and responsibilities. Izuku briefly remembered the final moments of their battle trial. He was holding onto Tsunotori's horns and then he passed out. At least that was the extent of his memory. So that begged the question. What happened after? Did she catch him? If so, then he was going to explode into a blush. No, just keep your cool. He took a breath and smiled. I am fine, Tsunotori-san. He saw the girl scrunch her brows. Perhaps his stutter was making it harder for her to understand him. It made it seem like he was adding more to his words when it was just him being bad at talking. I'm fine, Tsunotori, he said in English. The American's eyes widened. You can speak English. The group looked between the two of them as they made conversation, none of them really knowing what they were saying. Though Tsunotori looked happy that she had someone she was able to talk at a normal speed with. Izuku explained that he had picked up English as a pastime. He didn't really want to explain that he learned because all the articles about All Might's time in America were in English. And while there were some Japanese translations, there were interviews done with both All Might and his partner at the time, David Shield, that Izuku wanted to understand firsthand. So he got a book, learned which phrases translated, and eventually picked up the language. But that's besides the point really. Takage looked between the two and smiled. Opening her mouth, she was going to embarrass that crap out of the green teen. Sadly, she found a floating hand blocking her mouth and was met with a glare by Monoma. Just don't. She pouted. Fine. She'd get the blonde back for this. Eventually, she just had to play the waiting game. The bell rang and the students sighed as they went to throw their food away. Can you teach me, Midoriya? I'm really struggling with Japanese. Tsunotori got into a bow as she asked. Izuku blushed and waved his arms. Why, you don't have to, boy, Tsunotori, and why, yeah. I can try. He could try, because 1. He wasn't sure if he could teach someone something so difficult, and 2. He wasn't sure if he could teach someone so bright and cute without being blinded by said brightness and cuteness. Thank you. She glomped him with a smile. Izuku blushed but nodded. Why, you're welcome. ABB, and he was broken. Yanagi used her quirk to separate the two. Tsunotori blinked at the weird feeling of being moved without wanting to move as well as floating midair. The group made their way to class with Tetsu and Monoma helping Izuku walk as his brain was still crashed. Takage smiled as she held her head with her arms behind it. All that over a hug. What do you think will happen if someone ever kisses him? Or if Miss Midnight goes too far during class? Kendo and Yanagi sighed. I don't think Miss Midnight would go that far, Takage-chan. Kendo chastised. But Yanagi hummed instead as she pulled out her phone. Actually, I've heard quite the contrary. There are numerous posts on hero forums of recent UA alumni that have been, for lack of a better term, scarred by Miss Midnight, though I hope that Midoriya does not become one of those. Tsunotori looked between everyone. She wanted to feel included but didn't really know how to enter a conversation with her limited speech. She sighed and let herself just follow along with everyone else as she tried her best to understand what they were all saying. All the while, Komori and Kiwara were still holding a conversation with each other. Who's your favorite Nintendo character? Tito det ... Bowser is quite fierce, but Dark Link is very mysterious. They were basically just learning more about each other. After school, the main trio walked together as they left the class. They were just chatting, and Izuku felt happy about that. Just talking to them was nice. He idly played with the bracelet that Yanagi had given him. The bracelet strap was leather, so it was secured tightly around his wrist. He honestly had no idea how he didn't lose it during the battle trial, but he loved the gift. It also had each of their hair colors incorporated into it. The black band had specks of gold, most likely gold glue, on it. Then there was the green gem held in a silver container. It made him happy. Midoriya, you're going the wrong way, Monoma commented as Izuku was walking towards training ground Gamma. The greenette rubbed the back of his head. Actually, Monoma-kun, I have an extracurricular activity to do. Sorry that I won't be able to. Monoma waved a hand. Do not apologize, you don't have to. I hope you have a good time with whatever you are doing. Yanagi, are you coming with me? The ghost girl looked between the two of them and eventually she floated over to Izuku. I hope you don't mind, but I would like to accompany you, Midoriya. She tilted her head. Izuku gulped. It was actually kind of cute. He had a weakness for girls. He knew that. He didn't know how to deal with them. Sure, Yanagi-chan. They both turned to Monoma. SCU, Monoma-kun. Monoma gave them both a bow. Farewell for now, my friends. Good luck to you both. The boy turned around and flinched when he heard the yell of Blondie. He booked it to get off of campus as fast as he could. Izuku smiled a bit, though Yanagi got into his vision. Shall we go? She asked. He nodded, though with a blush as she was very, very, very close to him. It was nerve-wracking. He turned around and made his way around the campus. Yanagi followed behind him, floating and observing the surrounding areas. So Midoriya, Yanagi decided to spark up a conversation. What does this extracurricular activity involve? Ken-sensei said he was going to help me with my Q quirk, since I still don't know how to use it that well. He explained as they walked around. There were other students about the halls. A couple pointed and whispered, others glared. Izuku didn't know why. Hero course. He often heard, but he and Yanagi kept on walking. Well, in his case, Yanagi was still floating. Was that quirk training for her? If so, it was impressive, as she did it all the time. Should he do something like that to train his quirk? Perhaps. He should talk to Ken-sensei about that. Midoriya, you're muttering. Yanagi poked his cheek. Izuku yelped and backed up. Too close. If you two are done, then get in here. You don't have time to slack off, Midoriya. Izuku turned to see that they had arrived at training gym Gamma. The one who talked to him was Vlad King himself. Just how distracted do I get with my muttering? Problems to deal with later. The pro motioned them inside and the two obliged. The gym was massive. It was quite spacious, though it was completely flat. You two are lucky. This place is usually a mess, but since no one has had a chance to use it this year, it's completely clean. The pro grinned and readied his vocal cords. Ishiyama. The size of the gym gave way to an echo, and Vlad's voice vibrated throughout, shaking Izuku up a little. They heard footsteps and a sigh as the cement hero came into the gym. Cementos. The cement hero. Izuku had already gotten the man's autograph as he was their modern literature teacher, but still. The man chuckled briefly at Izuku's excited nature before turning to Vlad King. So, what exactly did you need me to build, Can? I do have lesson plans to get to work on, the pro said as he squatted and put his hands on the ground. I had an obstacle course in mind as well as some concrete blocks that the second years use for their super move training. Vlad answered. His fellow pro nodded and the ground shook. Izuku smiled as he pulled out his notebook. A wave of cement moved as an obstacle course was formed from the ground. The blocks Vlad talked about being formed away from the course. Cementos stood up and sighed. All right. Good luck, you two, and Can. Please don't get carried away. and left. Vlad grinned as he looked around. All right, Midoriya, there's a changing room around the corner. Go do that and then come back and we can start. Why yes, Kan-sensei. Abo bowed and left as quickly as he could to change into a more fitting set of clothes for training. Vlad placed his hands on his hips. Well, someone's certainly energetic about this. He turned to the more subdued partner that Midoriya had brought along. So, what are you doing here, Yanagi? The girl turned to him. I merely wanted to spend more time with Midoriya. She answered plain and simply. Vlad King raised a brow but decided not to press further. Merely wanting to spend more time with someone, yes sure, maybe that was the extent of it. But maybe it was something else. He didn't want to ask, but he did decide one thing. Never let Kayama see them together. The woman would lose herself over the cuteness of the two and do whatever she could to get them together, which in most cases didn't end well. He swore he'd never let it happen. I am back, Izuku called as he arrived in a gym uniform. Welcome back, Midoriya, Yanagi said as Izuku smiled. He was excited to be taught by Kan-sensei. Vlad King crossed his arms. All right, Yanagi, back up. Midoriya, I want you to activate your quirk at your maximum. Not 100%, the max amount you can handle, if you get what I mean. Izuku nodded and Yanagi floated over to Vlad to make space between them and the green-haired boy. He closed his eyes and summoned one for all into his arm. Red veins appeared across his arm before disappearing, his skin almost glowing, and small, minuscule sparks of green lightning arcing every now and then. It wasn't instantaneous, not even close, but it was coming to him slightly easier than before. He grit his teeth as he upped the percentage until he felt his bones start to creak. This is it, Kan-sensei. Yanagi and Kan both saw the flashy properties his quirk had. For a simple enhancer, Midoriya's quirk was very unique. Kan had a small grin on his face. All right, Midoriya, how much would you say this is? Izuku closed his eyes and felt the power for a second before responding. IW would say about 4%, sir. Honestly, Vlad had to hold himself back from shaking in excitement. The kid's full power would be 25 times stronger. It was amazing. He would totally be able to show up Aizawa with this kid. All right, for now, let's gauge your max for now. Go do the obstacle course. Yes, sensei, Izuku yelled. The two watched as Izuku ran the course, a cheerful bounce in his step. It was quite nice to see, since he was always a ball of nervousness, but it made them wonder why he was so happy in the first place. Was it because he was getting help with his quirk or something else? They didn't know, but both of them silently decided to themselves that they wanted to see him like that more often. The course was mostly just running with minor parkour jumps here and there. It was sets of walls and pillars that one had to jump off of and climb up. The structures grow in size to get to the tallest one. The greenette fell a lot, either from not being able to do certain jumps because he was underestimating or overestimating his quirk's power. Every time he would go back to the start and do it again, though he was getting some scrapes on his body, which Recovery Girl would not like at all. Vlad smiled as Izuku took up another attempt. He had a feeling about this one. The boy activated the quirk in his legs, the limbs glowing for a second, opened his eyes and ran off. He took 5 steps before jumping onto a wall, then he used his quirk to climb to the top of the wall in a couple leaps. He jumped from the top of it to another wall and ran across that one before leaping off to a surrounding pillar. The process repeated until he reached the top point of the course, or what was the end. He gasped for air. Oh okay, done. He made his way down and was drenched in sweat. The entire process had taken 30, maybe 40 minutes. All right, what's next, sensei? The man smirked. That, and pointed to a concrete block that Cementos had made. That? Izuku asked dumbly. Vlad King nodded. I want you to punch it, get a feel for how strong you are. The last thing you want on the field is accidentally overusing your power and killing someone. The pro explained. Izuku paled at his words. He would never kill somebody. Wait, Kan-sensei said accidentally. So of course he would never purposefully do that, but it was entirely possible to do it accidentally, especially if he didn't get a feel for his strength like Kan-sensei was talking about. He nodded. Why yes, sensei. Yanagi watched as Izuku charged his quirk into his arms and punched the pieces of concrete. Small cracks were formed and Izuku didn't seem to be damaged. Perhaps his quirk also increases his durability. If so, it's not to the same extent as his power and speed. If so, he wouldn't break himself every time he used it. She mumbled. Vlad glanced at her and sighed. Midoriya's rubbing off on her. Of course, that wasn't a bad thing, but it was even more of a reason to keep Kayama away from them. Izuku sighed as he charged his quirk into his arm one last time, gritting his teeth, powering it up quickly, and punching. The stone cracked, a spiderweb forming from the epicenter that was Izuku's fist and spreading throughout the stone block. He panted as he regained his breath. It's only so broken because I was able to get so many repeated attacks, but I can't kill anyone with his power output. It would definitely leave bruises, but 4% wouldn't kill anyone. He had even used it on Kamakiri earlier. And the boy was still alive. He looked back to see Vlad King nodding approvingly. It made him feel happy. You have a basic grasp of the limitations your current output has, but how long does it take you to activate your quirk? Izuku closed his eyes and focused, summoning the power into his arm again. He opened them back up. About 4, maybe 5 seconds, he answered. Vlad nodded. I'd say we focus on burning that time down to 2 seconds or less. How are they going to do that? Vlad had a couple of ideas really. So, get ready, Midoriya. Are ready for what? He only got a wide grin in return. Izuku was not ready. The plan was to attack him repeatedly until he could use his quirk to efficiently dodge out of the way. Going by his analysis, Izuku knew that his teacher was holding back a lot. Vlad wanted Izuku to actually get better. But still, this was a little too much. He jumped out of the way of a punch from the pro. His legs were burning from how much he had been using his quirk. But he was getting better at summoning his quirk. Now it was definitely lower, but he wasn't sure if he had lowered it to 2 seconds like Vlad King had wanted. Maybe 3 at the least. But he had gotten better on not having to focus so hard on keeping his quirk activated, which was good. And then he slipped and fell. Vlad winced. All right, I think that's enough for today, Midoriya. Izuku got up as quickly as he could. But I can keep going. Vlad could see a look of pleading in the boy's eyes. He wants to get better. He smiled a bit. Overworking your body won't help you right now. Plus I think you can catch up to your classmates within the month. But I don't want to just catch up. I want to excel. Vlad looked at the boy with sympathy in his eyes. He laid a hand on his shoulder. Then bring your best tomorrow. I'm counting on the fact that I'll see you here, Midoriya. I find your drive admirable, but I don't want you going too far as to break yourself or your body. Yes, plus ultra is our motto, but there is a fine line between plus ultra and overworking. Izuku sighed and nodded. Okay. I understand, sensei. It hurt to see the kid sad, but it was needed. He couldn't overwork himself. All right. Inagi, you're always welcome to come join us. I could perhaps even assist you in anything you need next time as well. The ghost girl shook her head. While I do appreciate the offer, sensei, I realize that Midoriya does need help. Speaking of, we should get going, Midoriya. It's getting late. Izuku rubbed his eyes with his forearm and grabbed his bag. Why, yeah, okay. They left, leaving the training gym quiet and leaving Vlad to deal with his thoughts. Damn it, I was too rough on him. The pro wanted to tear his own head off. He sighed. I'll review the footage of the battle trials. Get kids what they need to work on. Maybe that will help him. It was just the beginning, but Vlad knew there was going to be a long road ahead of him if he wanted that kid to reach his peak. But he swore he would get the kid there. To shove it to Aizawa, for his pride, and to help the kid out too. He clenched a fist. I will do this. Izuku grunted as he got out of bed. His body was still feeling terrible from yesterday. On top of the fact that he wasn't fully healed yet, he had trained with Kan-sensei and perhaps made it even worse. But yet, he was a little happy. He got to train with Vlad King. How many people could say that they've done that? After all, Vlad King wasn't the most social pro hero. It was also something to check off his bucket list. Train with a pro hero, and while of course All Might had trained him, it wasn't the same. All Might stood at the sidelines and observed, and while Kan also did that, he got to spar with Vlad King. Of course the pro wasn't trying and completely stomped Izuku, but it was still awesome. He winced as he threw on his uniform after showering. His body was in pain. I need to see Recovery Girl as soon as I can. He left the bathroom, not even trying to brush his hair, and went to the kitchen to get breakfast. He saw his mom running around and making an American-style breakfast for him. He had gotten a cookbook from All Might and he gave the book to his mom. All of the recipes were foreign dishes as a result of the man's stay in America at the start of his career. He found a smile coming onto his face. Hey mom, do you need help? The bubbly woman perked up and turned to Izuku. No, I'm all right. You just focus on getting ready for school, sweetie. She was smiling. Izuku didn't really know the last time he had seen her smile so genuinely, but he nodded. All right, love you mom. Love you too, she said. Izuku went back to his room and got all of his stuff together. He made sure he had everything. He grabbed his hero analysis that had his new sketch of his costume. He had managed to finish the sketch after he had gotten home. Experiencing the drawbacks of what he now dubbed his alpha suit, he knew what areas needed improvement. The new costume had the same basics, but it looked thicker compared to the skin-tight one his mom had made, and dark green was written off to the side. The respirator didn't have a smile on it anymore, and off to the side he made a note for it to be metal. He shoved his stuff into his yellow backpack and went to the dining room with it where his mom had put out the food. Thanks, Mom. No problem, sweetie. I have to go, but have a good day at school. She kissed his head and left. He ate his food alone, enjoying how good it tasted, and just felt happy. He had never seen his mom filled with so much joy since he was a kid. Maybe that was partially his fault, but it was behind them now. They could move forward to something better. He left his house with a smile on his face and got off a train to UA. He had a slight pep in his step as he approached UA, and why are there so many people crowded at the gate? Izuku asked himself as he observed a massive group of reporters at the gateway to his school. He tilted his head in confusion and gulped a bit. They were like a pack of rabid dogs in a cage trying to get a piece of meat. They were yelling, shoving, and just being rude to anyone coming into the school. He didn't want to deal with that. He honestly didn't think he could. Hello Midoriya. WOAH Jesus. He jumped high into the air, landing in the same spot. He turned to see Yanagi on his left. No, it's just me actually, she replied calmly. Izuku held his chest as he tried to calm his heart down. She just came out of nowhere. He didn't even hear her. She just appeared, almost like a ghost. Speaking of, I still need to ask why her telekinesis is called poltergeist. It's kinda spooky. After he calmed down, he turned to her, seeing her tilt her head. Is something the matter? CCC cute. Izuku chided himself, and no, nothing's wrong. I just don't know how I'm going to get on campus with all of the R reporters. They both turned to see the reporters yelling at Present Mike and some hobo-looking guy at the gate. They both looked kind of nettled, which was surprising because Present Mike was the most joyous hero Izuku knew, well besides All Might of course. Izuku sighed. He really wanted to find a way around them if he could, but nothing came to mind. Yanagi tilted her head as she thought of ways to help him. She wanted to be able to assist him, to find ways to make him feel better, to smile, and this would be the first step onto that journey. She turned to the reporters and then to Izuku. No plan coming to mind. She pouted. Why wasn't anything coming to mind? Izuku sighed. We should just go, Yanagi-chan. While he didn't want to go through whatever the crowd was, he did need to get to class on time. And he had to go see Recovery Girl to finish his healing process. They both looked at the crowd, seeing a group of students go in, consisting of yellow, black, red-haired boys, and get separated as they were rammed with microphones and yelled at by adults wanting a scoop about whatever was going on at the school. It looked like hell on earth. Izuku shivered. He really didn't want to go through, and he'd get separated from Yanagi from all of their prodding. He didn't want that. He didn't think he could handle it on his own. He'd cave in and just sink into the floor into a fetal position and start crying. He knew that. He felt arms wrapped around his own left one and turned to see Yanagi holding on to him. Hey, it would be detrimental if we were to get separated, so I hope that this is an alright action to take given our circumstances, she stated as she pulled him along. The boy's brain was fried. Too close. Even Tokagehas ain't done something this. Okay, that's a lie. Takage has definitely done something worse, but still. He blushed as they reached the reporters, his head resembling a strawberry or a tomato. The sea of reporters turned to the two students, or in their eyes fresh meat, and grinned. Excuse me, do you have any statements regarding All Might being a teacher? Have you been taught by All Might? How is it being taught by Japan's symbol of peace? Are you two dating? Izuku blushed and Yanagi huffed as she pulled them out of the crowd. Please just make a single statement, a reporter yelled. The two students stood in front of Present Mike and the hobo-looking man, the man narrowing his eyes at Izuku, making the boy gulp. Get on in, little listeners, we'll deal with this mob. Present Mike ushered them in. Yanagi still held onto Izuku's arm as she nodded and dragged the boy into the building. Present Mike turned to look at them inside. Never let Nem see the two of them, he told himself. Aizawa smirked. He knew exactly how to get Ken back for being an ass, having one of his students constantly being pestered by the R-rated hero. It was perfect. Now he was by no means a petty man, but he was annoyed with Ken. No one saw him take a picture of the two retreating students, and no one saw him send it to Midnight either. He smiled and turned his phone off and pocketed him. Take that, Ken. I'm losing precious sleep hours now because of you. Izuku blushed as the two walked through the halls. He hadn't been able to get out because he was still too brain-broken to do anything. You need to go to the nurse's office, correct? Yanagi asked him and he nodded, stiffly. Are you all right? Would you appreciate it if I let go of you? He nodded again and she did so. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable, Midoriya. Her voice was still semi-monotone, but Izuku could tell that she really was apologetic. It was nice. He shook his head. And no, it's okay, Yanagi-chan, don't worry about it. He regained the ability to speak. The girl nodded. If you say so, now let's get you to the Recovery Girl's office. She turned around and led him throughout the halls. He followed behind, trying to calm his blush. They arrived at the office and Izuku entered. Hello, Ms. Recovery Girl, he said. He heard the woman sigh as she turned around. She scanned him up and down with an intimidating stare. It made Izuku shiver. She hopped off of her rolling chair to address him. So, how are you feeling? Anything hurting? She asked as she sat him down at one of the beds. He rubbed the back of his head. I'm a little sore all over and my arm hurts, but other than that I'm all right, he said. Recovery Girl sighed and kissed his arm. Izuku instantly felt his body return to normal, no soreness and no pain. He smiled. Thank you. Thank me by not coming in for a week. If you do, I swear I'll kick your butt. She grumbled as she kicked him out of her office. Izuku sighed a little bit, but he knew that she was right. He also knew that she could definitely kick his butt. After all Might had warned him about getting on Recovery Girl's bad side. The #1 pro must have learned from experience not to do that. Well, that could have done a little better, don't you agree? Yanagi asked him and he nodded. Is she always like that with you? He nodded again. Izuku looked down and sighed. She's had to heal me 3 maybe 4 times this year. That's including the entrance exam. He rubbed the back of his head. So that's another reason why I need to get better with my quirk. Yanagi nodded. Well, I'm sure you'll get there with time. Yeah, but how long is in time? He shook the thought away as they arrived at their classroom. They both entered to see mostly everyone was already there. Ah, Midoriya, my friend. Monoma waved over. He was mid-conversation with Takage, but he clearly wanted to be doing anything but that. Izuku could relate to that. Hey Monoma-kun. Greetings Monoma-san. They both greeted the boy and took their seats. So, how was your extracurricular yesterday, Midoriya? Monoma turned in his seat to talk to Izuku. It was good. He had learned a lot, and while he did want to do more, they did have to stop. He knew that he was already injured, but could they have just done a bit more? Maybe it was for the best that they stopped, but still. So Greenie, what do you think we're doing today for heroics? Takage asked as she propped her feet onto her desk. If Monoma or Midoriya moved their heads enough, they might have been able to see up her skirt, and she knew that. Izuku blushed and opened up a notebook to divert his attention away from Takage. I don't know. And maybe we'll review the matches from yesterday. Actually, that'd be really interesting. And I'd be able to take notes on everyone's performances too. The boy gleefully started rambling. Takage pouted as his lack of a reaction. She thought that'd work. She turned to Monoma to see he was looking at anywhere but her. His friend sighed, already kind of used to his antics. That would be interesting. We only picked MVPs yesterday, so dissecting each match would help us learn what we did right and how to improve in places where we didn't do as well. Monoma added his own 2 cents. That would be the most helpful. Yanagi spoke. The conversation died down as Vlad entered the room. He strode to the podium and looked out towards all of his students. Honestly, he wanted to make the choices, but Nezu said it'd be good to allow the students to choose. It gave them a sense of freedom if they'd pick someone they'd trust instead of Vlad picking whoever he thought was the most suited. Alright students, today you'll be doing something that will affect you for the rest of the school year, and perhaps even years after. This will let 2 students shine above the rest of the class. He yelled. Izuku squirmed. He was a little too loud for his liking. But his words were intriguing, and not just to him but the majority of the class as well. An opportunity for some to rise above the rest. Now that was interesting. Izuku personally didn't want to seek out whatever it was, since he knew that he was behind most of the class and he wouldn't like the attention either. He wasn't used to getting attention, so when he did get it he just felt uncomfortable. But also, everyone else was ahead of him. He didn't deserve to get such an opportunity. After all, they were already running the race, while he was barely granted the right to be at the starting line. You'll be picking class representatives. Vlad King yelled, and Izuku was knocked from his musing. Class representatives. That wasn't what he was expecting. The man grunted. In the previous years I've been the one to select representatives. However, Nezu has convinced me to allow you to select them yourselves. You'll be voting democratically. He crossed his arms. Select before homeroom is over. After that we'll be doing something different for your heroics class, and I'll have an announcement for tomorrow's heroic exercise as well. He continued. The class looked around as he quieted, and then they exploded into chaos. Yo, I'd totally be the best pick for a rep. I do believe that I'd be the best pick. My holy light is best equipped for guiding little lambs to a better tomorrow. I'd be the best fucking rep for class. Izuku folded in on himself as the class descended into madness. Vlad sighed. This is exactly why he always picked the reps instead of allowing the students to do it. They were still too immature. They weren't ready for serious stuff like that. Alright, never. Clap. The class quieted as a loud clap sound was heard. They all turned to see Kendo with her hands enlarged. She let out a sigh. You heard Kan-sensei. Just vote for however you want and quit all the yelling. It's unnecessary. If you want votes so badly, then vote for yourself, but that won't get you anywhere. She sat back down. Izuku looked on in wonder. She expertly controlled the situation. Now everyone was quiet. They were all given paper to write their votes on, and Izuku was split. He didn't know if he wanted to vote for Kendo or Monoma. Kendo was really nice, while Monoma showed he could get a little unhinged by his display on their first day. But he knew more about Monoma. However, Kendo handled the situation very well. He tapped his pencil on his desk. He didn't know who to choose. Honestly, maybe it'd be easier if he knew more about Kendo. Monoma was a really good friend though. Monoma was one of the first ever people to be kind to him. And there was the fact that maybe he knew a little bit of what it was like for Izuku to live as a quirkless, having a copy quirk and all. But Kendo showed signs that she was strong and smart. Maybe she was fit to be a leader. She definitely had the quirk for it. Izuku sighed. He didn't know what to choose. Plus, what if people didn't respect Monoma because of his quirk? That's the way the world worked. People only looked up to those with strong quirks. That's partially why All Might was number 1. He had virtually the strongest quirk. Now that was Izuku's. It made much more sense for Endeavor. He didn't seem nice. He didn't have a good on-screen personality. The only thing he had going for him was his strength. The strong were respected, and while Monoma's quirk took a lot of skill, it required the help of others. Izuku sucked in a breath. I am sorry. And Monoma-kun. Izuku apologized as he wrote down Kendo's name on his piece of paper. Yanagi instantly knew who she was going to vote for. It was Midoriya. Her choice was a no-brainer. The boy may have had a little bit of trouble talking to people, but she believed him getting an opportunity such as this would help him. But she also believed that he would be a good leader. She had observed him during the battle trials. They won all because of his planning. And he sacrificed his own body to win as well. He was strange, but it was a good kind of strange. He was very interesting. That was the best way to put it. And perhaps having him in this position would allow everyone to see how interesting he was. Izuku Midoriya. She tapped her pen and looked up, seeing the back of his poofy head of hair. She wondered how it felt to touch it. It looked really soft. Would he be all right with that? Well, she grabbed him by the arm and walked him around today, so maybe he would be. Monoma himself was also split between picking between two people. It was quite ironic. Midoriya and Kendo were his choices. Takage was also a choice, but he ruled her out as she was too carefree. He couldn't see her in a position such as a class representative. The duty had a lot of responsibility, and she'd just to send the class into chaos. He knew Midoriya would take it seriously, but would he be able to handle it? He'd have to deal with everyone constantly pestering him about things, and he didn't know if that'd help the boy with his self-esteem or not. It was a gradual slope until he got better. They couldn't just rush it. So making him the rep seemed like a bad idea. Kendo, on the other hand, well, she had a good quirk. She seemed to be reliable, and she seemed nice as well, but there was their battle trial. But then again, while Midoriya had won, he had also been incapacitated. Monoma sighed. He knew his choice, but it left a bad feeling in his heart. Kendo Itsuka was what he wrote down. Vlad collected everyone's votes and tallied them on the board. It was obvious most people had voted for themselves, but there were those that didn't even have a single vote, like Shishida and Shizaki. Then there were those that had multiple votes, two that stood at the top. The cinnamon roll and the big sister had the most votes. Izuku Midoriya had 4 votes and Itsuka Kendo had 3 votes. Izuku's brain had stopped functioning. People voted him to be a class rep. He couldn't do that, and he got 4 votes too. What the heck? Kendo had a much more subdued reaction, her eyes widening just a bit for a second before she smiled. Takage pouted. She thought she'd at least get vice rep, but it looked like that wasn't going to be the case. The amount of pranks she would have been able to get away with. Monoma looked down in regret. Midoriya had gotten 4 votes. If he didn't vote for himself, then that meant 4 people trusted Midoriya more than Monoma did. Was he a bad friend? He didn't vote for Midoriya, and he had known and hung around the boy a lot more than some others had. Maybe. Vlad cleared his throat. All right. We have Midoriya as our class representative with Kendo as his vice. Are there any objections? No one said anything, so he nodded. All right, both of you come up here. Izuku got out of his seat looking embarrassed. He was still surprised that so many people had voted for him. Him of all people. He and Kendo stood side by side at the podium. Do you two have any words to share with the class? Vlad asked. Kendo smiled. Thank you all for the opportunity. I promise I'll do my best to help all of you. A couple of people clapped and then they all turned to Izuku. Izuku opened his mouth only to close it. He was locking up. No bad time. He was nervous, too nervous. They were all expecting him to say something. He looked at them all, staring expectantly at him. And then his eyes landed on Takage. She was giving him a thumbs up. And so was Tatsu. Komori and Yanagi had smiles on their faces. They trusted him. He didn't know how, but he knew that they voted for him. He found strength, he found confidence, and opened his mouth. I know I'm not the best choice. Not by a long shot. His words caught all of their attention. Yanagi creased her brows. She didn't like it when he put himself down like that. Takage raised a brow in interest, and Tetsu seemed to lose the smile that he always had on his face. Komori seemed to get a bit sad as well. But other people have confidence in me, so I should have confidence in myself as well. I promise I'll do my best to live up to all of your expectations and more. He yelled with as much resolution as he could. The class was quiet. They weren't clapping for him like they did with Kendo. Monoma smiled and shot out of his seat, clapping as if he'd just seen the best movie to come out in the past 2 centuries. Bravo Midoriya. Absolutely splendid. He yelled. Yeah dude. Manly as hell. Tetsu cheered, activating his quirk and smiling as much as he could. We're all counting on you, Greenie. Takage cupped her mouth with her hands as she yelled and smiled. There's no one I'd rather have taken up such a position. Yanagi said. Izuku barely caught it because of how quiet she was, or how normal she was compared to everyone else's loudness. Komori hadn't said much, but Izuku saw her smiling just a bit. Izuku found himself smiling. He had friends now. Actual friends. All right, go sit down you two. We need to move on to the next part of class. Vlad ushered them to their seats. Both of them did so. Izuku caught Yanagi smiling at him before he sat down, and he smiled back. The girl cheered in her head. He's smiling. I made him smile. Though it was with the help of a couple others through all of us voting for him, it still counts, does it not? Now I just need to make this happen more often. Vlad smiled. All right, today for your heroics class we're going to be going over your battle trials from yesterday. Takagi, Yanagi, and Monoma side. Izuku hit it right on the head again. The boy himself pulled out his notebook, ready to take notes. All Might will not be joining us today, sadly. But I have another announcement. The students perked their heads up. Usually we wait until later in the year, when all of you have gotten used to the proper rescue protocol and have gotten it drilled into your heads, but this year Nezu decided to change it up. Originally we were going to have rescue training today, and Wana would have it tomorrow, both in the evening so you could have as much energy as possible after lunch without the grogginess of it being early in the morning. His words caught the interest of the students. After all, rescue training sounded super cool. But Izuku caught the word originally meaning plans had changed. Vlad sighed, however, due to circumstances because certain events that happened between him and Aizawa, Nezu decided to change it up a bit. We've decided that the winners of the battle trials get a sneak peek at rescue training. Everyone else will perform it at the point we usually have it later in the year. The students that lost all grumbled and pouted. Kamakiri was seriously pissed. He really wanted to shout something right now, most likely a profanity. Izuku cheered. He was one of the winners so he'd get to go. Wait, and no. He put his hand up as quickly as he could. Midoriya, do you have a question? Vlad raised a brow at the boy in question. He nodded. Why yes, Ken-sensei. You said winners. I'm assuming that means the winners from Wana as well. He asked, trying not to sound too wobbly, but his voice did so anyway. Vlad sighed. Sadly yes, 10 from each class. Aizawa will be with you all as I'll have to cover for the students that are going to be staying behind. So I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. It was all Nezu's idea, of course. Ken wasn't sure if it was because the rat knew about the situation with Aizawa and Midoriya, but he just had to roll with it now, as much as he didn't want to. Izuku put his hand down. Kaken was going to be there. There's no way the blonde wasn't going to be there. There was no way that he had lost in the battle trials. He gulped. All right, now we'll start with the first match. Midoriya and Tetsu versus Kamakiri and Tsunotori. Vlad King announced, and the students looked as a recording started playing on the front wall from a projector. It showed the first match and it went up until Tetsu and Izuku met Kamakiri before pausing. All right, Vlad King sighed as the image of Tetsu leaving Izuku behind was frozen for them all to see. Tell me where they went wrong here. Izuku seized up. Was his plan really that bad? Vlad saw out of the corner that Izuku had locked up. He wanted to yell at himself. He had to remind himself not to be too hard on Midoriya. Tetsu looked stumped. It was clear that he wasn't a thinker, as he had left most of the work to Midoriya. But it wouldn't help if Midoriya was the only one commenting on his own mistakes. The greenette did put his hand up, however. He decided to fight me alone like a dumbass. Kamakiri yelled, Izuku seizing up again and putting his hand down. Vlad instantly saw a couple of students get pissed. Now Kamakiri, that's hardly any realistic criticism. After all, you did lose. His voice was as even as steel and he could see the boy was about to pop a blood vessel. Now does anyone else know what they could have done a bit better? He asked, trying to rectify his mistake from earlier. He saw Izuku put his hand up with more confidence this time. No one else had any clues, but it did look like the cogs in their brains were turning, so that was good. All right, Midoriya, what do you have? Izuku seemed deflated, a bit sad, and a bit tired as well. We should have switched, or taken Kamakiri out together. Vlad nodded. Would you care to elaborate on that? The boy nodded. Why yes, sensei. Tetsu-kun's quirk was a perfect counter to Kamakiri-kun's quirk, and I could use my quirk to evade Tsunotori's. It would have been better if our roles were swapped, or we could have taken the time to eliminate Kamakiri so we'd have an easier time later on. Vlad nodded and Izuku put his hand down. He looked disappointed in himself for not doing that instead. Well, now you know, with the gift of hindsight. We make mistakes so we can learn from them, so don't feel too bad, all right, Midoriya? The boy quietly nodded and Vlad sighed. That'd have to do for now. All right, now on to the next match. Takagi and Monoma versus Shizaki and Kodai. Now what could the heroes have done better? They played the next match and Izuku watched as the hero team split up. Well, that was their first mistake. They should have stuck together, perhaps even used their quirks in tandem. Wait, Kodai's quirk didn't work on living things. Did that include Shizaki's hair? He wasn't sure. Kendo came to the conclusion that they shouldn't have split up, and that Shizaki should have been more extensive in her search for the bomb. But the question did arise, was putting the bomb on the roof allowed? Shizaki put her hand up. Shizaki, did you have anything to improve upon? Vlad called on her. The girl was frowning. She turned to her left and stared at both Monoma and Takagi before turning back to the front. Was placing the bomb on the roof really a fair thing to do, Kan-sensei? I heavily doubt that something such as that is fair, as it is such a sinful act, she stated with a straight face, though her creased brow showed that she was slightly angry. The teacher dragged a hand over his face and sighed. The world wasn't black and white, but the religious girl seemed to think that it was. The pro caught Izuku wiggling out of the corner of his eye. Midoriya, you seem to have something to add, so please tell the class. He did his best to make it seem like he wasn't calling out the boy or picking on him. He semi-did it. The religious girl turned to Midoriya. What do you have to add, little sheep? Okay, Izuku learned something. He did not like being called little sheep. It felt very insulting for some reason. Takagi and Yanagi looked at Midoriya, and they both decided that little sheep fit Izuku very well, especially because of his head of hair. Yanagi really wanted to run her hands through it. It looked so soft. Izuku opened his mouth. Well, Monoma-kun and Takagi-chan were playing the roles of villains, so of course they weren't going to play fair. Villains don't play by the rules. If anything, it showed that some of you still have a lot of work until we become HHH heroes. His last words were harsh and he barely got them out. He didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but it was true. Shizaki stared at him with blank eyes and nodded before turning away from him. Vlad nodded. Exactly, Midoriya. Good eye. Now let's move on to the next match. The class continued. Izuku learned that Yanagi and Bondo had played villains and had rather easily contained the heroes using their quirks in tandem with each other. They didn't cover the bomb in glue like Izuku had thought, but that was just a random thought Izuku had. They fought Oase and Kaibara. They managed to negate Oase's quirk using their powers in tandem. Bondo made glue. Yanagi shot it and hit the welder's hands, then Bondo hardened it. Kaibara could break the glue, but they didn't give him a chance as they focused their efforts on him. Oase seemed lost now that he couldn't do much, not even use his hands to help. So the heroes had lost. Kendo and Shishido were the heroes in their match and had lost to Honuki and Fukudashi. Mostly the recommendation student using his quirk and intelligence to get the jump on the heroes. Shishida's lowered intelligence in his beast form had not helped the situation at all. Izuku was surprised that the redhead had lost. She seemed saddened by the fact as well. He knew it wasn't her best performance, but he also knew she could do better. Now that she was one of the class reps, she could show that fact. They needed to work on their reaction time and minimize their quirk drawbacks, mostly in Shishida's case with the quirk stuff. Komori and Kiwaro had covered the hulls and fungi as villains, and the boy had entered the dark fungi and got the jump on the heroes. Shota and Tsuburaba's quirks couldn't do much as Kiwaro had so much area to move around, and with all the black mushrooms that Tsuburaba's air walls were useless and Shota couldn't land a hit, negating his quirk. It was honestly amazing. The heroes needed to work on making plans on the fly when they were pushed into a corner. So the people going to rescue training would be Izuku, Tetsu, Monoma, Takagi, Yanagi, Bondo, Honuki, Fukudashi, Komori, and Kiwaro. Kendo could maybe watch over the 1B students that were going to be staying behind. Izuku sighed. He wanted to go to lunch. Vlad brought the class attention back to himself. Alright, so you know who'll be going to do rescue training, you know who's going to be staying behind. You know where you fell short and you know what to do to improve, now do it. He didn't need to elaborate any further, he knew they knew what to do. Now, the period's over, go to lunch. Vlad left the class and the students all got out of their seats. Tetsu stretched his back and grunted. Man, I hate sitting down for so long. I mean, man, come on. If we have a hero class period, then let us do something. I totally get you, Tsuburaba said from in front of him. He felt something in his back pop when he got up and stretched. Izuku put his things in his bag. He had written down so many notes. All of his classmates were so interesting. It was just they were all so cool. Midoriya. Izuku turned to Monoma as he called out his name. Why yeah, Monoma-kun. The boy looked sad, or maybe regretful was a better way to put it. Izuku wasn't sure. He wasn't good with people. But he knew something was wrong. I just wanted to say congratulations on becoming our class representative. It's a very big duty and holds a lot of responsibility. Oh geez, Izuku was getting nervous now. How much would be on his shoulders now? Everyone would be counting on him to lead the class and he wasn't sure if he could do that. But I know you can do it, Midoriya, Monoma said with a smile. Thank you, Monoma-kun. Izuku smiled just a bit. It seemed to relieve Monoma's regret too. We are friends, Midoriya. No need to thank me. Alright, he kept on forgetting. How many times had they reminded him of that? If you two boys are done talking, hurry up. I don't want to be last in line. Takagi started pushing them to exit the class. Fine, Takagi, but please calm down. Will you? Sorry, Takagi-chan, but there'll still be food, right? Yanagi floated over with her bag. While that is true, I do believe it'd be best if we hurry over. That way we can maximize conversation time and consuming time, killing two birds with one stone. Her words didn't register with the surrounding students, but Monoma and Izuku had gotten used to her speech. Chatting while eating, it was just more reasonable. Hey guys, wait up. Tetsu and Kendo followed after the group, Kiwaro and Komori following not so far behind. Tsunotori as well coming along because she didn't have anyone else to hang out with. They arrived at the cafeteria and began to eat. Izuku was rather joyful as he had found a bowl of katsudon that Lunch Rush had made. Somehow he didn't find it as tasty as his mother's cooking, which made him a little sad. But that didn't mean it was bad, it was good. Just not as good as he expected. Hey Midoriya. Izuku looked up as Kendo spoke to him. I was thinking we should go find the reps for Class 1A, introduce ourselves and talk to them a bit. Do you think that's a good idea? She asked him. Izuku stared at her blankly. On one hand, no, it was a terrible idea because Izuku didn't know how to properly socialize. On the other hand, it was probably good to build connections with 1A, especially after the whole scenario that happened the other day. But what would happen if he ran into Kakin? No, I can't worry about that. I can't just live my life in fear of him. He sighed as he looked at Kendo. I think that's a great idea, Kendo-chan. He responded. The redhead smiled. All right, then let's go. She stood up. Izuku scrambled and got up as well. See you guys, he said to the table as they left. Takage smiled as Izuku was out of earshot and turned to the rest of the table. So can we talk about how Little Sheep is just the perfect nickname for Greenie? She was so going to use that nickname with him now. Izuku sighed as he and Kendo walked around. They asked Class 1A students, differentiated by the singular buttons that they had on the shoulders of their uniforms, about who their class representatives were and that they wanted to meet and greet them. They learned that they were 1 Momo Yaoyorozu and Tenya Ida. The girl has black hair and a spiky ponytail. The guy has blue hair and he's a square. You can't miss the dude. They spoke to a member of their class, Kaminari Denki, and he told them the information. Now I was wondering as I could get your thanks. All right, Midoriya, let's go. Kendo quickly turned around and walked away. Izuku waved and left nervously. It's all right, dude. Shiro gave Kaminari pats on the back. Thanks, man. Izuku and Kendo finally found who they were looking for, and they both realized that when Kaminari said he's a square, he was being literal. The boy was so geometrical. They didn't know how to explain it, but he kinda seemed like a robot. Then they both realized they'd met this boy before. Izuku during the entrance exam and Kendo during Izuku's incident the other day in the cafeteria. To say these feelings were negative was an understatement. Izuku felt an immense amount of fear. The boy was overly rude, loud, and he made Izuku feel like an idiot and unsafe during the entrance exam. Kendo was just angry. This guy thought they'd attacked that Bakugo guy the other day when it was the other way around, honestly. So, they both turned away from him and instead to the girl with the spiky ponytail sitting next to him. Excuse me, you must be Yaoyorozu-san, correct? Kendo decided to spark the conversation. With Izuku's current skills and anxiety, she knew that he wouldn't have the confidence to do it. Both of the WANA members looked up from their conversation and gazed at them. The Ravenet nodded at Kendo's question. The Ida boy pushed his glasses up and had a frown. Excuse me, we are having a private conversation. It is incredibly rude to just barge into one that is still currently happening. He was weirdly chopping his arms to accentuate his words. Both Kendo and Izuku tilted their heads. Maybe he is a robot. Kendo sighed and turned back to Yaoyorozu. It's nice to meet you. We heard you two were elective to be the representatives for your class, and as fellow representatives we thought to introduce ourselves. Kendo gave a small bow. My name's Itsuka Kendo. It's nice to meet you, Yaoyorozu-san. Izuku did the same. I like what Kendo-chan said. And nice to meet you. He didn't stutter that badly. Score. Yaoyorozu got out of her seat and bowed as well. It is nice to meet you as well, Midoriya-kun, Kendo-san. Ida-san, come introduce our fellow representatives. The glasses boy was shocked. He was supposed to greet such rude people. Kendo waved a hand. Actually, don't worry about that. We already know of Ida-san. However, I'm sorry to say it wasn't the best first impression. She tried to say with as little bite as possible, though Yaoyorozu definitely heard it. She seemed a little sad. Oh, well, I'm very sorry about that. I'll make sure Ida-san does his best to treat you and your class properly from now on. She smiled and clapped her hands together. The glasses boy didn't even get a say in anything of this, and that was something he was a little angry about. Kendo smiled. Thank you, Yaoyorozu-san. Though I do have one more request that I'd like you to keep, if it's not too much trouble. It was clear that Izuku was afraid of that Bakugo boy, and whatever was going on between them had negative effects of him. So she'd do her best to limit the interaction between them as much as possible. Yaoyorozu tilted her head. What could it possibly be? She asked. Well, you see, a person in your class has not been the kindest towards Izuku, and it's not Ida over there. Kendo pointed at the blue-haired boy and glared at him. He seemed to shrink under her gaze. It's someone by the name of Bakugo. I'd like it if you kept him as far away from my class as possible. He's already caused most of my classmates to develop hatred for not only him but your entire class. What? Surely this is some kind of mistake. He haven't done anything wrong. And even so, Bakugo's actions do not reflect entirely on our class. To think such is a leap in logic. Ida finally made himself known as he yelled, now standing beside Yaoyorozu, and did his weird arm-chopping thing. Kendo sighed and crossed her arms, staring at the boy with no amusement in her eyes. Well, it's not just that one student. You as well, Ida. The boy recoiled in shock. The other day when Midoriya was attacked by Bakugo, may I remind you for no apparent reason, you were yelling about how we were terrible for grouping up on him. She huffed and placed her hands on her hips, openly glaring at the glasses boy. You knew nothing about the situation and made an assessment based on your limited knowledge. Not the best performance for someone in the hero track. Ida took a massive blow to his pride and Izuku was shocked. Maybe, just maybe, Kendo had gone just a teeny tiny bit too far. Okay, she definitely went too far and by the looks of it Ida wasn't taking it well. Kendo-chan, don't you think you're being just a bit too harsh? The redhead turned to him. Well, not entirely. Level 3 security alert. All students please calmly make your way out of the building and to safe areas outside. A robotic voice sounded over a blaring alarm for all of the students to hear. Izuku winced and put his hands over his ears. It was too loud. Yaoyorozu caught a second year that was already running towards the exit to the cafeteria. Izuku noted that the student wasn't doing so calmly. Excuse me, but what does a level 3 security alert mean? She had to yell to be heard. It means someone managed to break onto campus. The student yelled and quickly left, many more coming after him and taking the group of 4 with them. Izuku and Kendo found themselves being taken in by a crowd. Izuku was too cramped, having elbows and shoulders shoved into him. It was extremely uncomfortable. This is exactly what he didn't want to happen this morning with the press. He collided with another person and winced. Opening his eyes, they landed on a familiar brunette from the entrance exam. It's the nice girl. He quickly turned away. Hey, do I know you? He heard her say, but he didn't respond. Instead, he looked around, looking for one of his friends. Maybe someone had an idea. He and the brunette were at the window of the hall. They could get a look of the outside. And Izuku's eyes landed on the reporters. Kendo was really not enjoying herself currently. She was pressed against the wall and was being squished too much. She caught the sight of Midoriya and a girl pressed against the glass not too far away inside. Fate was too cruel to the boy. She glanced outside, trying to see anything. Maybe a cop taking a villain away in handcuffs, only to see the press. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. So, what's up, Red? She almost yelped at the air being blown into her ear. She turned to see a floating mouth and a floating ear. Talkage, the one and only. The mouth smiled. So, do you need help with any of this stuff or? Kendo sighed. Yes, she did need help. She had a couple of ideas. She could maybe clap and draw attention to her and then tell everyone to calm down like she did in class. But she couldn't bring her hands over her head because of all the people pushing her. Her arms were without a doubt stuck to her waist. She turned to look at Midoriya down the hall. He had more space, but also, maybe this could help him with his confidence a little. Yeah, I do need your help. Do you see Midoriya down the hall? Wherever you are, can you spot him? The mouth closed and hummed before smiling. I got eyes on Greenie. Kendo nodded. All right, I need you to tell him it's just the press. See if you can detach your upper body and pull him above the crowd so he can tell everyone. Kendo didn't see it, but Talkage tilted her head. Why not just have me do it? I could do it pretty easily and no. She asked in a questioning tone, but then she gasped and smiled. Or do you want Greenie to have all the limelight like a pro hero? Oh, you're so nice, Kendo. But what's the catch? Do you like him or something? Is that why you want to do it? Because if so, I'm gonna have to fight you on that one. He's my green buddy, you can't have him. Kendo sighed. You look into things way too much. I thought it'd just be good for confidence. Talkage huffed. You're no fun. And you're being annoying. Now go do the thing. Fine. The shark teeth girl groaned, her mouth and ear flying off to reconnect with her body. She grinned as her upper body, waist and above, disconnected, the surrounding people staring at the action with wide eyes. All right, come on, Greenie. She flew around the crowd and found Izuku in a very compromising pose with a girl. She smirked as a prank came to mind. She flew down and landed on Izuku's back, throwing her arms around her shoulders, essentially hugging him from behind. Izuku, I can't believe it. Are you cheating on me? TTT Talkage-chan. What are you talking about? WWW or N not like that. His face exploded into a tomato due to his embarrassment. The brunette turned to both of them. She was interested in what was going on, and also wanted to know more about the person that saved her during the entrance exam. She'd be a little disappointed if he turned out to be a cheater since he seemed really cool during the entrance exam. Talkage smiled. Not yet, she cooed into his ear. She giggled at his reaction. But anyways, Kendo wanted me to pull you above the crowd so you can tell all these idiots it's just the press. She yelled to make sure she was heard. Izuku shook his head to get out of his stupor and nodded, a slight blush still on his face. All right. He needed a distraction, something, anything, to stop thinking about Talkage, especially because she was pressing her body against his back. So, why you're going to pull me up? He asked, his mind completely forgetting about the nice girl next to him. Yup, so don't freak out. And do your best, Greenie. She cupped him from under his armpits and pulled up. She would admit he was heavier than she imagined, and sturdier as well. It made her lick her lips. With a pop, Izuku was above the crowd and hovering above everyone, though no one seemed to notice at all. You got this. Izuku nodded, thanking her a little before looking at the crowd under him. It was so much worse than the press this morning. He could see Komori and Kiwaro stuck, the taller teen trying to protect the shorter mushroom girl. He saw Yanagi at the end of the hall, not trapped in the chaos, tilting her head at the crowd. And he spotted Tetsu standing strong with his quirk activated. You all can't move me, I'm too manly. Just try it. Izuku sighed at the steel teen's words. He took a deep breath. He could do this. Kendo trusted him to do this. He had to do this. He was the class rep for 1B. He had to show they could count on him, that they had a good reason to pick him. He gulped. Jay, just do your best. But how good would his best be? He closed his eyes. The doubt was seeping in and he wanted to cry. He couldn't. He wanted to, but he knew he couldn't. Why? That's how it had always been. He'd never had any faith or courage, not even himself. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't do this. You are worthy of inheriting my power. I've been looking for a successor for years, but I've never found one that embodies my hopes and ideals until you. You, young Midoriya, you remind me of myself and my mentor, for better or for worse. This road will be tough, but I have absolute faith in you, my boy. It was just a random memory, or bits and pieces of memories throughout his 10 months with All Might, but those were real words his idol had told him. I'm worthy. Useless Deku. I embody his hopes and ideals. You can't do anything right, can you? I mean seriously, you're so pathetic. He has absolute faith in me. No, it's not just him anymore. So many people had faith in him. The 4 that voted for him to lead the class, Vlad King, even now. His own mother. He smiled just a bit. Takage-chan is right. I've got this. He opened his eyes and they glowed radioactive green as he activated One for All, why and where, to his throat, so he could yell without his vocal cords shredding. He knew One for All gave him a slight increase in durability, so hopefully this would help. He sucked in as much air as he could. Everyone be quiet right now. The chaos stopped and everyone froze. Tetsu's even deactivated his quirk in shock. Many turned to see Izuku being held up by Takage. Oh shit, I knew it. He is the quiet kid. Fuck. Izuku gulped as hundreds of eyes landed on him. He took a deep breath and calmed himself. He could do this. It's just the press. So stop worrying. There's no villains or anything like that. So just calm down. He yelled and gasped for air when he was done. Everyone seemed all right now. The students left through the doors and Takage brought Izuku down. Well, that was once heck of a show. Didn't know you had it in you to yell like that, Greenie. She smiled as she reconnected with her lower body. And neither did I. Izuku placed a hand on his chest. His heart was beating so fast. He could hear it in his ears. It was so nerve-wracking. Takage smiled and patted him on the back. Well, good job. Izuku smiled. That was a big step out of his comfort zone, but it was nice. The rest of the day passed without incident and they had regular classes. Izuku stumbled into his home with a smile on his face and ate a good dinner. After all, he'd need it tomorrow for rescue training. He flopped into bed. Tomorrow's going to be amazing. I already know it. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.